Chapter 1169. Even the movements of the other fell orcs froze for a moment before they continued their charge. A large group of orc laborers were getting closer and closer to the virtual Protoss gathered together. However, before they could get close, many of the virtual Protoss scattered in all directions. Only Yu Ting was still standing in front of the orc laborer who had been pierced by the lightning spear. The orc laborer was still struggling in pain, showing its indomitable vitality. Yu Ting approached it again and grabbed the other end of the lightning spear with his hand. The fell orc lying on the ground waved its arms, trying to hit Yu Ting in front of it, but it was all in vain. Its speed was already very slow, and now that it was injured, its body was shrouded in plasma. The power of lightning was constantly eroding its nerves and muscles, making its movements even slower. Yu Ting floated upside down in the air, his hand gripping the lightning spear from top to bottom. Only when the beastman laborer's huge arms swept over would he release his grip for a brief moment. Most of the time, his body could only be seen swaying left and right, skillfully dodging the attacks of the beastman laborer. Every time he held the spear, the plasma covering the orc laborer's body became more dazzling, and the crackling sound of electricity became louder. On the other side, the scattered virtual Protoss had taken away most of the fell orcs, but there were still two of them rushing straight in Yu Ting's direction, getting closer and closer. Finally, before the two fell orcs reached Yu Ting's side, the big guy on the ground suddenly tilted its head and died. Yu Ting quickly pulled out the lightning spear. With a flash of light, the spear disappeared from his hand. Immediately, the light on his combat uniform began to flicker wildly. He looked back at Qin Guang with a hint of provocation and dissatisfaction. This guy must have earned a lot of reward points in one shot, Qin Guang thought. With the number and combat power of this fell orc, it was worth at least 100 reward points each. Forget it, it's time for me to make my move. At least I finally know one of Yu Ting's trump cards. It was the lightning spear that he just pulled out. Its power was not to be underestimated. If it stabbed me, I might not be able to withstand it. The balance of the middle realm of the Holy Grail was so bad that it made one's hair stand on end. They were all players, so they should stand at the same starting point. It did not make sense that these virtual Protoss were so much stronger than normal players from the very beginning. Also, it was obvious that the virtual Protoss had not used his reward points yet, but this divine Emperor Yu Ting had directly pulled out a spear from his crotch. Fine from his body. This is going to scare me to death. The biggest bug in the slaughter world, that is, Qin Guang himself, was currently shamelessly ridiculing the garbage balance of the slaughter world. Qin Guang's but was extremely crooked. The same words came out of Yu Ting's mouth, but it didn't seem out of place at all. Qin Guang had a perfect physical body, a martial sage's inner strength, and the innate talent of the Great Earth Explosion. He was the most unbalanced aspect of the game. After taking a deep breath, Qin Guang shouted at the normal players, "Everyone listen up. First, lure all the orcs to my left. Try to gather them there. Then, when I give the signal, gather towards my side immediately." The normal players noticed how the virtual Protoss dealt with the fell orcs, but they could only be envious. If they wanted to defeat the orc laborers one by one like the Protoss, there had to be a prerequisite. Just like fighting the magical beasts, they had to have a main tank in front to attract the boss's firepower while the other players dealt damage. Based on the current situation, the attacks of the normal players were unable to break the defense of the orc laborers. It was like scratching an itch through the boots. The main damage output had to be from the main tank. "Mr. Adam, do you intend to do the same? Is there a problem?" Peasant, who was being chased by two laborers, turned his head and asked uneasily. Qin Guang nodded helplessly and said, "I have to do it even if I can't. I can't let them rob everything, right?" When he finished speaking, Qin Guang looked in Yu Ting's direction. Yu Ting was currently jogging leisurely with the two beastman laborers following behind him. While running, he kept taking out Red Bull and pouring bottle after bottle into his mouth. He was recuperating. It wouldn't be long before he attacked the second fell orc. About 5 minutes later, the ordinary players had also split the fell energy orcs into two sides. As for Qin Guang, he lured an orc laborer to follow behind him. His method was simple. He just had to turn around and spit at the orc periodically. Qin Guang glanced at the orc from the corner of his eye. Seeing that it was about time, he shouted, "That's enough, come over here." After roaring, Qin Guang abruptly turned to the side and circled around the beastman laborers. The orc laborer turned around and faced his back against the walls of the Colosseum. Taking a deep breath, Qin Guang turned around and gave Yu Ting a provocative glance, which Yu Ting was also looking in his direction. Yu Ting seemed to have recovered, but he wasn't in a hurry to attack. Qin Guang grinned. his eyes seemed to be saying, "Didn't you want to see my trump card? Old man, I'll show you how good you are." With this thought in his heart, Qin Guang gave Yu Ting a thumbs up before he abruptly turned his thumb down. "Lord Yu Ting, is he praising us?" Vasani asked blankly. The Emperor Yu Ting nodded. "Yes, he's ready to attack. I didn't expect to meet such a respectable opponent in this game. I haven't felt this excited in years. Is this the legendary Heroes Cherish Heroes?" Vasani asked again. Yu Ting smiled and nodded. "Yes. Even if we are enemies, the strong are always worthy of respect. Then I'll have to return the favor." Vasani looked like she had learned something. She also gave Qin Guang a thumbs down as he retracted his hand. On the other side, Qin Guang silently listened to the conversation between the two gods. He could only silently spit out a mouthful of blood. "Who the hell is praising you? Who the hell wants you to return the favor? Forget it. Let's do it." Qin Guang turned around. The orc laborer had already rushed in front of him. He was waving his huge green fist high and punching down from above. In the face of this situation, Qin Guang did not panic. Instead, he took a deep breath, clenched his right fist and punched upwards. Even the ordinary players who were rushing back and the virtual Protoss who were peeping over were shocked by this scene. "He's going to die." There was a loud bang as the orc laborer's fist and Qin Guang's bamboo-like fist collided. The scene of flesh and blood splattering didn't appear as everyone had expected. Qin Guang just suddenly disappeared. What's going on? Just as everyone was wondering, a bald figure suddenly rushed out of the ground. This time, he avoided the Fell Energy Orc's fist and swung his arm at the orc's chin. The Fell Energy Orc raised its neck slightly, but the bald figure seemed to have hit a spring bed. It bounced back to the ground at an even faster speed and once again sank deep into the ground. The strength of the orc laborer's neck was terrifying. Besides, it turned out that Noon had suddenly disappeared because he had been smashed into the ground. But before they could catch their breaths, the disappeared Midday rushed out of the ground again, bringing with it a great deal of dust and mud. Qin Guang once again punched the Fell Energy Orc's chin. The big guy raised his neck even higher. Only then did everyone understand Noon's tactics. Obviously, he had the same level of physical strength as the Fell Orc or maybe even a little stronger. But the Fell Orc was too strong, and if he kept getting knocked away he would not be able to maintain a high degree of suppression and always attack the same spot. So he came up with this overbearing and unreasonable tactic, letting the orc hit him from top to bottom. That way he would only fall into the same spot in the ground every time and he would not be hit. This tactic seemed simple, but it was actually insane. Other than him, who else could withstand the continuous heavy attacks of the Fell Energy Orc? And when he landed, there was no cushioning force at all, so he would be hurt twice. But the moment he was smashed into the ground, he could immediately fight back. What kind of explosive power, what kind of recovery was this? Could his body withstand such a heavy burden? Under similar circumstances, the combat power that Qin Guang displayed was equivalent to twice that of Yu Ting. In fact, these people only saw how cool Qin Guang was when he was showing off, but they did not know how hard it was for him to hold on. Every time he was smashed into the ground, he felt as if his body was about to shatter inch by inch, and all his bones were about to shatter, and the pain was like being electrocuted all over his body. At the same time, he used his true martial divine skill and the Earth Miner's innate self-recovery ability to stabilize the shattered bones and restore the severed muscle fibers and tendons. This consumed a lot of his energy, but when he punched the Fell Orc's chin, he was able to absorb the Fell Orc's 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 Fell Orc. However, the process was unbearable. "Why are you guys in a daze? Come and help." Qin Guang shouted angrily when he saw the normal gamers standing at a distance in a daze. The gamers came to their senses, but they didn't dare to come into contact with the orc labor. Peasant came up with an idea. She asked loudly, "Does anyone have any long-range weapons or means of attack?" The mixed martial arts coach, magician, stood up and said, I can. Why don't you try using my poker cards?" On the other side, Qin Guang and the Fell Energy Beastman were still fighting to their heart's content. Everyone was looking at the powerless poker cards in the air with stiff expressions, unable to do anything about it. "You can't use my poker cards to attack with power," Magician said in distress. His fingers shook slightly, and a King of Hearts shot out from between his fingers like a ninja dart towards the neck of the orc labor that was being attacked by Qin Guang. The other gamers weren't able to do so. The same card was blown away by the strong wind created by the fight between Qin Guang and the orc. Then, "Those with long-range abilities can give it a try first. We'll discuss it later." "We'll discuss further," Peasant instructed. And so, 7 or 8 normal players gathered around and started working. One of them hesitated for a short while, and a great sniper rifle appeared in his hand. When others asked him how he got it, he finally had to admit, "Actually, my awakened talent is thermal weapons, but I've been reluctant to use reward points before. This is a weapon I just exchanged, and the 200 reward points that I saved with great difficulty are all gone." The might of his sniper rifle was truly extraordinary. Furthermore, this man must have come in contact with firearms in the outside world. He could always grasp the gap between Qin Guang's attacks and accurately hit the beastman's neck, leaving a deep mark on its green skin. "Forget it, I'll spend my reward points." Another ordinary player stood up. With a flash of light, a dragon chief bow with exquisite craftsmanship appeared in her hand. She pulled the bowstring and a green arrow shot out from between her right fingers. The arrow extended to her left hand that was holding the bow. "This is my awakened ability, Inferior Elven Bow." "Inferior Elven?" a girl at the side asked enviously and bewilderedly. The bow-wielding lady blushed and said, "This is my first awakened ability. This should be the weapon of the weakest elven race, the ordinary elf." "Will it be a medium elf next time?" "No, it's the Inferior Elven Warrior Bow," the bow-wielding lady said as she released her fingers. As the bow-wielding woman spoke, she loosened her fingers, and the magic arrow whistled through the air, piercing the neck of the beastman laborer. Its power was comparable to that of the big sniper from before. As she shot the arrow, her face suddenly turned red and she staggered, but she gritted her teeth and pulled the bow again. At the same time she explained, "With my current ability I can only shoot 2 arrows at once. After that I'll have to drink Red Bull to replenish my energy." The beastman laborers that had been shaken off were still closing in. Those with long-range abilities were already firing at full force, while Qin Guang continued to bombard the beastmen's necks. However, it seemed like he wasn't making enough progress. Qin Guang urged again, "Do you have any other methods? Otherwise we'll have to retreat when the other orcs are closing in. The beastmen have amazing regenerative abilities. If we don't succeed, all our efforts will be in vain." The gamers were anxious, but they were helpless. With the physique of a normal gamer, even a small scratch on the orc skin would cause them to be smashed to pieces. At this time, a chubby boy from the Genius Junior High School team stood up weakly, raised his hand high and stammered, I might have a way." "Tell us," Peasant urged. The chubby student shrunk his neck after being shouted at by Peasant. "But I'll need everyone to give me their Red Bulls." The coach, who was not far from the chubby student, asked, "What do you mean? What's your ability?" The chubby student looked at the student, who nodded. Then he said, "My ability is summoning." "Summoning? Summoning what? Jenny Turtle? Pikachu?" The youngest girl in Peasant's team asked excitedly. The chubby student's face turned red. "No, it's summoning electrical appliances. To be precise, the heaviest electrical appliance that I can summon is a microwave oven." "What?" Even Qin Guang, who was a distance away, couldn't help but complain. "What kind of superpower is that? Why don't you summon a refrigerator? Isn't that better? Please use a refrigerator." The chubby student was helpless. "Mr. Dang, my awakened ability is too weak. I can't summon a refrigerator." Chapter 1170. Fine. Microwave it is then. Hurry up and get to work. Everyone else, listen up. There's something wrong with the floor of the Colosseum. It will recover on its own. Now the hole below me. Damn the hole below me. *CK. In short, the depth of the hole below is 8 meters, so the time when I show my head is fixed. You guys have to find the right time to smash the microwave on the orc's neck. Don't miscalculate the time and affect me," Qin Guang urged. Although the fatty's ability looked weak and weird, it might be useful in this special situation. Smashing the heavy microwave on the orc's neck was quite fun. In addition, there were always some ordinary players who had strengthened their bodies. The microwave that was thrown over could bring out the awakened ability of these people, so they could not only be spectators. Unfortunately, he couldn't transfer the reward points to others. Otherwise, Qin Guang felt that it would be better to get everyone to give him 2,000 points so that he could upgrade the microwave into a refrigerator. As for why he didn't pay for it himself? Are you kidding me? We're not related. You're not beautiful and you're a man. You didn't hang out with me at first, but you're the little brother of a restless middle school student. I have no reason to be a lay foam, right? Qin Guang cursed in his heart. He stabbed his hands into the soil on both sides of his body and suddenly exerted strength. His whole body rushed up again. Then he stabbed the tips of his feet into the soil beside him and continued to climb up. After 2 or 3 seconds, he appeared under the orc's chin again. As he dodged the orc's heavy punches, Qin Guang clenched his left fist and punched upward at the orc's neck. At the same time, he turned his body to look in the direction of the ordinary players. He saw the boxing coach, whose arms had become particularly thick, holding an iron cube in his hands. It was the heavy new microwave oven. His face was red as he tried to stretch his hands backward. He only heard a loud roar and suddenly twisted his body. The muscles of his arms burst, and the microwave oven flew toward the orc's neck like a cannonball. A little further away, the fat man was sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. He raised his hands and opened his palms. 2 laser beams were moving rapidly under his palms, and a square 3D image gradually appeared in the form of a cross-sectional scan. The moment before Qin Guang's head hit the ground again, he saw this brand new microwave oven take shape. A man at the side leaned over and hugged her. Sure enough, the world was so big that nothing was too strange. This fatty's ability was incredible. When he emerged from the ground again, Qin Guang saw an even more unbelievable scene. The man who was hugging the microwave just now actually played a trick. He grabbed the fastener on one side of the microwave with one hand and spun it like a top. When Qin Guang's head popped up again, he spun at least 7 or 8 times before he abruptly let go and flung the microwave out. The force of the microwave was even stronger than that of the boxing instructor. This guy must have practiced discus in the past. At the same time, the fat man was continuously making microwave ovens. As time passed, he was sweating profusely, but his speed was getting faster and faster. It was even better than a production line. If he could bring this ability out, he could probably create a fat man brand behind media and super. As time passed, the orc laborers that were pulled away slowly came closer. Peasant chose 5 to 6 normal gamers who were fast but weak. He asked them to follow Qin Guang's method of spitting saliva to infuriate the fell energy orcs. Then he led the orcs in circles to pull the small monsters. These normal players also performed exceptionally well. They were actually able to drag 4 or 5 orc laborers around in circles at the same time. Only 1 or 2 orc laborers managed to escape. One of the normal gamers pulled the 2 orcs away to buy more time for Qin Guang. Finally, after 4 minutes of Qin Guang's action, the fell energy orc fell to the ground. Its originally indestructible neck was broken. The last slash was taken by Qin Guang. The reward points were distributed immediately. After calculating Qin Guang's last slash, they were distributed according to their contribution points. Each orc had 1,000 points. Qin Guang received 700 points. The rest of the normal gamers received at least a few points, and some received tens of points. Unexpectedly, the one who received the most points wasn't the discus thrower, the mixed martial arts instructor, the magical archer, or the sniper. It was the fat man who provided firepower support for the microwave ovens. He received 90 points. The gamers had complicated expressions. The Red Bull used by the fat man to produce the microwave ovens was pooled by the gamers, but he received the most benefits. Qin Guang stood on the disappearing corpse of the orc and observed the undercurrent of the crowd. He was annoyed by the gamers' schemes. Keep your strange gazes to yourselves. It's reasonable for the gamers to have the upper hand in this mission. Otherwise, if any of you can conjure some shot put or javelin, wouldn't it be better? As for me, it's only right that I get the most, right? Listen up, I don't care what kind of clique you have, but at least at this stage, everyone has to work together. His words were only symbolic and the others might not listen. It was hard to tell what was in a man's heart. Qin Guang said again, "Okay, I've seen all of your performances. I'll take out 10 spots and let these 10 people make the last slash, okay? Whoever wants to purposely cause trouble for me showing up for work but not putting in the effort, then they can go and destroy themselves." Everyone's eyes were as bright as snow, who contributed more and who contributed less. Look at these guys who are in charge of luring the orcs. They're only doing a little and no one said anything. The speed-type players were bitter. It's not that we didn't say anything, it's that it's useless to say anything. It's not that we didn't say anything. It's just that it's useless to let us hold the microwave ovens and smash the orcs. Okay, the Protoss are moving again. Let's work harder. Qin Guang clapped his hands together and without any rest, he set his sights on another fell orc. Yu Ting, who was fighting the second fell energy beast man, was startled when he saw this. Isn't that guy tired? Yu Ting's guess was right. At this time, Qin Guang was not physically tired at all. He looked like he had used up a lot of energy, but in fact he did not even drink Red Bull. The fell orc, which was like a poison to others, entered his body, but was completely suppressed by his Earth Exploder Arcana, and became nutrients instead. After killing the first orc, Qin Guang took a short breather, and all the injuries on his body healed. He was full of health. It did not take long for the second fell orc to die in Qingguang's hands. On the other side, the virtual Protoss led by Yu Ting had finished before Qingguang, but Yu Ting himself was sitting on the ground resting. He was sweating unbelievably. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Yu Ting said to Vesni, "I can't remember the last time I sweated. Lord Yu Ting, this may be a good thing. In the celestial realm, your power is too strong, and it is difficult to experience the feeling of challenge. We came to this mysterious game to become ordinary players, and this special experience will bring us benefits." Yu Ting nodded and looked in the direction of Qingguang. "Yes, I hope that when my projection returns to my real body, it can make my power, which has been stagnant for many years, grow again." Vesni also looked in the direction of Yu Ting's gaze. "Noon, this guy is quite efficient." "No, he is killing the orcs a little slower than us." "Then he what?" Under Vesni's slightly horrified gaze, Qingguang, who had only rested for less than 10 seconds, stood up and walked towards another orc laborer. As for the other ordinary players, they had already started pulling the orcs as soon as he sat down, and now they had some space. Qingguang jogged over, chasing after a fell orc. He picked up a shell from the ground and threw it forward, hitting the back of the fell orc's head. "Bastard! Come and fight me." The orc turned and roared, waving his arms as he chased after Qingguang. Qingguang spat out a mouthful of saliva, which stuck on the tip of the orc's nose, and then turned and ran slowly. Yu Ting and Vesni were completely dumbfounded. What was this guy's body made of? Why was he more like a god than a god? "No, we're only a projection here. Our power has been greatly weakened, and we're constantly being suppressed by the laws of the world. It's normal that we're weaker than the local boss, Noon. It's just that this guy is a little too overpowered. No, we can't let him continue like this. We have to increase our efficiency. Otherwise he will rob all the orcs." Yu Ting struggled to stand up and gritted his teeth as he spoke. Vesni asked worriedly, "Lord Yu Ting, are you all right?" Yu Ting's palm emitted lightning as he took out his lightning spear and shook his head. "I'm fine." As the two gods conversed, before the ordinary gamer could lure the orcs, Qingguang had already started fighting the orcs. Time passed quickly. An hour later, Qingguang had killed tens of fell orcs. Then he said to the ordinary gamers, "Good, we'll start assigning the orcs. First, peasant." "Why is it her? This isn't fair. She didn't exchange for a weapon and she didn't deal much damage to the orcs." A member of the mixed martial arts team questioned. Qingguang looked at him coldly and said, "I have thousands of reasons to explain to you. For example, peasant's leadership was praiseworthy. But I don't have the time to deal with you. I'll use the simplest reason to give it to you. I'm willing. Do you have any objections?" There was dead silence and the gamers looked at each other. They didn't expect the gamers to be so unreasonable that afternoon. This is not a house, nor is it your ivory tower school, nor is it your company. This is a world where the strong prey on the weak. Here, the strong have the final say, and the weak have no right to question. I won't take care of you like your father takes care of an obedient child. If you can accept my decision, follow me. If not, get lost and find a corner to squat in. Qingguang's expression became colder, and the gamer kept quiet out of fear. Seeing that it was enough, Qingguang continued, "I know that many of you feel that it's unfair, and you might be unhappy with me. You might feel that I'm stronger than all of you right from the start. But I'm not interested in explaining to you because any of you could die in the next mission. What does it matter if I'm unhappy with a corpse? I'm sure you're all elites in real life and have your own pride. You might not listen to me. I won't waste my breath on you. If you're unhappy with me, think of ways to become stronger and surpass me. When your fist is bigger than mine, you have the final say. Now listen to me." The hale and hearty elder clapped his hands and said, "Mr. Dang is right, that's how it should be. Let's continue with the next assignment." It's you, Mr. Dang." Qingguang nodded and pointed at the elder. Seeing that the elder was hesitant, he said, "I'll say this one last time. I don't want to explain my decision to anyone. If you want to listen, listen. If not, get lost." On the other side, Divine Emperor Yu Ting was sitting in a corner with a pale face. He felt his balls aching as he watched Qingguang act pretentiously to his heart's content. In the beginning, after he began to shorten his rest time and increase his killing speed, the virtual Protoss team's efficiency temporarily surpassed Qingguang's. But as time went on, he became more and more tired, and his efficiency became lower and lower. Red Bull could relieve physical fatigue, but it could not stop his mental exhaustion. Every time he completed a kill, the time he needed to rest became longer and longer. Gradually he was left behind by the Noon team. Damn it, my projection's willpower is too weak. It's not even a trillionth of my real body's willpower. I lost to him in willpower. Yu Ting waved his arms angrily. Vesni looked at him and did not say anything. She knew that the Divine Emperor Yu Ting did not need comfort. Forget it. That's it for the third mission. Yu Ting stood up and walked to the next fell energy orc with his lightning spear. At this time, Qin Guang was not in the mood to eavesdrop on Yu Ting. He looked strong on the surface, but in fact he was not relaxed at all. He was also cursing. Yu Ting, this bastard, is he trying to force me to death? You're a divine emperor. Is it worth it to steal kills from a mortal like me? Are you trying to let us get 2 more kills to eat? Besides, what's the use of snatching so many reward points? Silently looking at the game interface that has reached more than 23,000 reward points, and then looking at the ability enhancement that is still gray, Qin Guang really can't speak. If he had the habit of keeping a diary, he would write like this. At first, I thought I could get 20 points like everyone else, but then I realized I was wrong. So I began to look forward to 2,000 points, but I could only eat soup. Later, I thought that 20,000 points would be of some use, but the cruel reality told me that it was all an illusion. Time continued to pass, and after another hour, Qin Guang finished killing 10 ordinary players, including the MMA coach, the sniper, the elven archer, the hale and hearty old man, and the genius junior high school student. As for the kid who defected to the enemy, he could only eat soup. Also, the fatty did not get a share. In fact, he contributed quite a lot, but considering that he could make a lot of money from the bonus after each kill, there was no need to compensate him. Congratulations, players, for successfully completing the third mission. You will have half an hour to rest. As the announcement sounded, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and fell down in exhaustion. Qin Guang just sat cross-legged on the ground. He had to maintain his image as a master. Chapter 1171. Peasant sneaked to his side like a thief and sat down. Mr. Dang, I have 2,000 points to exchange for the second awakening. Oh, that's good. But don't be proud. Did you see that fat guy? And the fridge beside him. Are this guy's clothes? Peasant turned his head and guessed, is it because after the second awakening, there isn't a novice combat uniform? It's probably because his body can withstand the energy. He's lucky to have a suitable awakening ability. He got a lot of bonus points. Qin Guang said meaningfully, luck is a part of strength. According to the experience of Mission 2, Mission 4 should be simple. I won't let my guard down this time. Of course, everyone will learn from their mistakes. Everyone will be more careful. Alright, exchange for abilities. Qin Guang said as he observed the gamers. After 3 consecutive missions, the normal gamers were improving rapidly. From fear to calmness, from strangers to familiarity, from confusion to clarity of purpose. Even their gazes became more determined. Peasant, who was beside Qin Guang, closed his eyes, and his body was shrouded in flowing light. When she opened her eyes again, the newbie combat uniform on her body had also disappeared abruptly. She wasn't naked. Instead, she was wearing a plain cotton clothing. Qin Guang felt that peasant's clothing was the standard equipment given by the system after creating a new account in the online game. 0 attributes, 0 bonuses, and 0 benefits. How is it? How do you feel? Qin Guang asked. Peasant's expression froze. The hourglass in my shop increased in price. Ah? That's it? Nothing else? Not really. My ability is enhanced, but if I'm still an orc laborer, it won't be of any use. It's alright. There are specializations. Every ability has a suitable entry point, just like the microwave oven fat guy. Alright, you go do what you need to do. I need to rest. Qin Guang waved his hand and closed his eyes. Thanks to the countless years of fighting in the world of the cup, even though his mind had been sealed in the past, after experiencing so much and comprehending so many things between life and death, his nerves were much more resilient than he had imagined. Lu Li rarely praised him, but in this aspect he was truly talented. However, this time, in order to steal kills from the virtual Protoss advance party led by Divine Emperor Yu Ting, he was exhausted both physically and mentally. After closing his eyes and dreaming for half an hour, Qin Guang slowly opened his eyes. The 4th mission was coming. The 4th mission is about to begin. All players, please keep your distance from each other. Quest hint: kill your own mirror image. Sure enough, the massacre mission would never play its cards according to the norm. There was no such thing as a high difficulty mission and a bonus question. Mission 4's hint was very meaningful. Qin Guang couldn't help but be curious. He could roughly imagine other people's mirror images, but what about his own? A peerless master? The strange-looking Earth Mine-Eater that had finally revealed its true appearance? An actor? Or was it something else? Also, when they saw their own image, would it be their current appearance or their true appearance? Also, what did the massacre world mean when it separated everyone? Did everyone have a separate battle platform? Was it separate or connected? Could others see us while we were fighting with our mirror images? As Qin Guang's thoughts ran wild, the final countdown came. At this time there was no one around him, and the other teams reluctantly scattered. Everyone's team had just matured, and everyone in the same team had just finished sharing their awakened abilities with each other, but in the blink of an eye, they had to fight alone again. With the countdown of 3, 2, 1, the ancient Roman Colosseum shook violently as if there was an earthquake. The ground under everyone slowly rose with a rumble. After about 3 minutes, everyone stood on a circular platform with a diameter of 15 meters. No one dared to be careless and looked around vigilantly. But this was not the end. After a short pause, a light curtain rose from the edge of the round platform. The higher it went, the narrower it became. Finally, it formed a dome that looked like a pot lid. Qin Guang nodded with satisfaction. Although he couldn't peep at others, others couldn't see his ability either. He especially had to be on guard against Divine Emperor Yu Ting. After the dome was completely sealed, the cheers of the audience in the Colosseum couldn't be heard. It became completely silent inside, and the atmosphere was even a little stifling. Qin Guang stood up straight, looking around and listening in all directions. He was on guard at any time. He wasn't sure what his mirror image would look like and where it would come from. If it's as sinister as me, then it will definitely be difficult to deal with, Qin Guang thought. Just as he was thinking about this, a round hole suddenly appeared in the air in front of him about 3 to 4 meters high. This was the space-time tunnel that Qin Guang was familiar with. He didn't know where the other end of the space-time tunnel led to, but he could only see rays of golden light coming from it. Qin Guang squinted his eyes and stared at the hole. He held his breath and didn't dare to be careless. The light from the hole became brighter and brighter, and Qin Guang ridiculed, "It can't be that a sun will jump out from inside, right?" As he said this, the light inside was so bright that he almost couldn't open his eyes. It was even more uncomfortable than raising his head to look at the sun on a hot summer's afternoon. But he definitely couldn't close his eyes at this time. If the sinister mirror image took the opportunity to sneak attack him, wouldn't his face be covered in tears? Therefore, he forcibly poured his inner strength into his eyes and stared at that place. After a few short seconds, 2 lines of clear tears gushed out from his eyes. His eyes were burned. But this didn't matter. Even if his eyeballs exploded, they could grow back. Qin Guang expressed that his emotions were stable. Finally, after a brief moment, the dazzling light gradually dimmed and Qin Guang could finally see the silhouette of a person that floated out of the cave. Well, the mirror image really could only learn the surface. It couldn't learn the sinister side of the old man. It seemed that this world of slaughter mission was as stable as a dog. It didn't even know how to sneak attack. Wait, what the hell is this? Why is my mirror image so handsome? He stared at himself, in midair with his eyes wide open. His face was full of disbelief. This man was wrapped in a shining golden armor from head to toe. He looked very much like the legendary Saint Seiya. He was tall and straight and his long hair was elegant. The most important thing was that his face was not Qin Guang's current bald appearance, but his original appearance. But Qin Guang couldn't understand. He had seen this face for so many years that he was used to it. He was usually not praised as a handsome guy. But why did he feel that his mirror image could be so handsome? Did I unknowingly become a narcissist? Or is there a deviation in my own aesthetics? The golden armored mirror image slowly floated down from the hole and landed 3 or 4 meters in front of Qin Guang. Its empty eyes looked at Qin Guang. Qin Guang suddenly understood. The reason why he felt that this golden armored mirror image was very handsome was either because of the effect of the golden saint suit on him, or because he had a temperament that he currently didn't have. I really don't want to admit it. In fact, I was talking about the temperament of a tall, rich, and handsome man. Suddenly, the golden armored mirror image bent his body slightly. Qin Guang didn't dare to be careless. He was also ready to fight. A few seconds later, the golden armored mirror image flew out like a cannonball. Its speed was so fast that even Qin Guang was shocked. Seeing that the situation was not good, Qin Guang flew back while cursing in his heart. You said it was a mirror image, but it was clearly fast. Of course, retreating was not as fast as moving forward. In the blink of an eye, he was caught by the golden armored mirror image, and then the golden armored mirror image punched him in the face. Whether it was the posture or the expression when the punch, the mirror image was almost the same as him. Qin Guang thought that although this was a mirror image, it seemed to be a little faster than him. Maybe it was also stronger than him. Let me try. Well, it was indeed a little abnormal. Qin Guang thought while flying in the air. Just now he tried to punch, but the golden armored mirror image went all out in every move. Qin Guang's right fist, which only used 70% of his strength, was easily broken, and then the punch hit his chest and sent him flying. At least 3 of his ribs were broken. However, he didn't have a chance to breathe at all. Before he landed, the golden armored mirror image was already waiting for him below. In the air, Qin Guang endured the pain and twisted his body. His inner strength burst out, and he used the lightness skill that he hadn't used for a long time. His body changed directions in the air cleverly, and when he landed, he barely avoided the golden armored mirror image's punch from below. However, he still couldn't escape the mirror image's elbow attack after the instantaneous change of move. He was accurately hit in the abdomen by a Dongpa elbow, and he flew horizontally on the ground. He still didn't have any chance to breathe, and the mirror image continued to chase him. Fortunately, this time he was close to the ground, and Qin Guang had a place to borrow strength. He jumped with the tip of his toes, and his whole body shot out like lightning, barely avoiding the leg that fell from the sky. It had only been a few seconds since they started fighting, but Qin Guang had been in danger 3 times in a row. He didn't dare to imagine what it would be like for other ordinary players to face their own mirror images. After finally seizing the opportunity to get up, Qin Guang didn't care about anything, and just ran wildly to open up the distance. The golden armored mirror image chased after him, and he ran desperately in front. He ran laps around the small arena, and he didn't want to face his opponent head-on. At first, his movements were a little staggered, but after a few minutes, his injuries gradually recovered, and he ran naturally and smoothly. While Qin Guang was running, he was also racking his brains for a way to change the situation. Although he had the ability to regenerate, he would exhaust his ability sooner or later if he kept being chased like this. It seems that the mirror image can't catch up with me? As he ran, he suddenly realized this. When he looked back, it was as he expected. The distance between him and the golden armored mirror image was almost constant. Qin Guang immediately understood this principle. It wasn't that the mirror image was faster than him. It was just that he had been too careless before, and he didn't completely squeeze out all his potential and burst out with the strongest speed, which reflected the mirror image's speed. It was the same principle, including the punch that put him at a disadvantage at the beginning of the fight. The so-called 4th mission to kill one's mirror image was actually to defeat oneself, and to be the strongest self. To complete the 4th mission, the gamer had to squeeze out all his potential. That was because every gamer's opponent was a version of himself who had used up all his potential. To defeat the mirror image was to surpass the limits of oneself. After understanding this principle, Qin Guang felt much more relaxed. At most, he would give it his all at every moment. Even if he couldn't take it anymore, he could drink Red Bull. He didn't know how to use his 23,000 points. After thinking about it, Qin Guang realized that after the 3rd mission, there were a few gamers like Peasant who had accumulated 2,000 points to exchange for the 2nd awakening, so they didn't have many points left. Thinking about it this way, it was the people who performed the best in the first 3 missions who were in the most danger. Forget it, I can't care so much. I'll just pray for my own good luck. With this thought in his mind, Qin Guang abruptly came to a stop and turned around. He raised his fist and roared, "It's time to see if you have the same talent as me." Chapter 1172. This time he no longer held back and punched with all his might. He knew the golden armored mirror image as well as he knew himself. He knew what choice the mirror image would make in the face of his counterattack. Sure enough, in the face of the heavy punch, the mirror image did not dodge. After a muffled groan, he also swung his fist at Qin Guang. The 2 of them punched with their right fists at the same time. Neither of them blocked the other's attack. They just wanted to punch each other. Qin Guang cursed in his heart. What an idiot. Didn't he know how to avoid the sharp edge and then counterattack with his legs when the opponent was exhausted? Wasn't this more effective? However, after cursing, he immediately realized that he was not scolding himself for being stupid. In the blink of an eye, both of their fists accurately hit each other's chest. It was exactly the same force and it hit the same place. The 2 of them flew backward in the air at the same time. Even their postures and expressions as they struggled to regain their balance were exactly the same. If it were not for the golden armored mirror image's holy clothes, Qin Guang would even have the illusion of looking in a mirror. With 2 bangs, the 2 of them landed in the distance. Without thinking, Qin Guang turned around and continued to run while holding his chest. He was injured again. At least 3 of his ribs were broken. However, the injury on his right hand was more serious. It was a bloody mess and the broken bone was like a broken tree branch. It looked very funny. Qin Guang was in so much pain that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. What made him extremely angry was that his fist had hit the golden armored mirror image with the same force, but it did not cause the same injury. The mirror image had an extra armor than him, and there was definitely something strange about the armor. It did not cause any obstruction to the mirror image's movements, but at the same time, it could provide him with a super strong defense. When Qin Guang's fist hit the golden armor, he first found that his strength was evenly distributed by the armor and dispersed to all parts of the mirror image's body. Before he could react, he felt a strong force surging from the mirror image's chest armor and attacking his fist. As a result, while Qin Guang's chest was injured, his fist was also severely injured. Fortunately, he had rich experience in being injured. Although he was in pain, he was not careless when he fled. Moreover, he was recovering from his injuries as he fled. But he was more or less affected. From time to time, the mirror image would catch up to him and punch him in the back. Fortunately, he had made up his mind to escape and not resist. Although the mirror image's fist was heavy, it could not break his bones. Instead, it provided him with a rocket-like thrust every time, making it easier for him to escape. After running for a long time, when his injuries were almost healed, Qin Guang's speed was completely the same as that of the mirror image again. Only then did he have the mood to look back at the golden armored mirror image behind him. He was immediately overjoyed. Although the change was subtle, it was true that the golden armored mirror image was slower than before, by about 1,000th. Even though my punch was buffered by the armor, it still caused some damage to him. That's right. The internal force of the old man is so strong. There is no reason for me to let you break my bones and injure my internal organs, while you were just bitten by a mosquito, right? Other people might not be able to see it, but this was Qin Guang, the strongest dart player in history, the strongest internal force martial artist, a super pilot, and a best actor. He had a pair of top-notch eyes that could see the general trend. Even if the gap was as small as 1,000th, he could still see it. Well, it was actually a blind guess. He purely relied on the legendary sixth sense. But at this time, he had no better choice but to believe in his own judgment. After a while, he felt that his state was completely adjusted. Qin Guang turned back and punched again without saying a word. This time he pretended to swing his right fist, but in fact he lifted his left leg to kick the opponent. Flying in the air again, Qin Guang was also amazed. Compared with this broken mirror image, it was really like looking into a mirror. He was playing tricks, but he didn't expect that the mirror image would also play tricks. The result was the same as the last time they fought, except that they used their left legs to kick each other's stomach. Fortunately, I didn't know how long I hadn't eaten and my stomach was empty. Otherwise, I would have kicked yesterday's dinner out. The human abdomen was a very vulnerable position. Once it was violently hit, it was easy to be fatally injured and even life-threatening. For example, Qin Guang now felt that his spleen must have been broken, his kidney was not much better, and his spine was 100% dislocated. As for the other injuries, he didn't bother to care. Anyway, if it were someone else, they would have died 7 or 8 times. What made Qin Guang admire him was that even in such a difficult situation, he could still grit his teeth and run. It was just that his speed was much slower than before, and he kept being kicked in the butt by the mirror image in the golden armor behind him, which looked very miserable. After a long time, Qin Guang finally recovered. When he looked back, he was further convinced of his previous judgment. This sneaky mirror image must have been injured, and it didn't have his recovery ability. The 3rd time, the 4th time, the 5th time, in the 6th exchange, Qin Guang finally got what he wanted and punched the mirror image's neck, a spot that wasn't protected by the golden saint garment. As for himself, his neck was almost broken, but the result was gratifying. The mirror image in the golden armor was also seriously injured, and he also developed a new idea. After all, being hung by the neck did not affect the speed of running. After a while he looked back. The state of the mirror image in the golden armor was really much worse than before. This time, Qin Guang finally saw the light. The ability of the Earthburster was really high level. Obviously, it was not something that could be replicated by a high-level Heaven Cup. Aren't you very capable? I will exhaust you to death. Thus, Qin Guang relied on his roguelike talent as a great earth popper to fight the golden armored mirror image. But what he did not expect was that after suffering a loss, the mirror image no longer foolishly let him attack the neck. Every time he attacked him, he was very careful, protecting his neck while attacking Qin Guang's neck. In desperation, Qin Guang sold his neck and hit other parts of the mirror image. It seemed that he suffered every time, but in fact he made a lot of money. Later, his physical fitness and talent ability slowly could not keep up, So he decisively began to use his reward points to exchange for gold sore medicine and Red Bull. Compared with ordinary people, his consumption of these two medicines was much greater. Fortunately, he had more than 20,000 points. Anyway, there was no place to spend them, so he could make as much as he could. As the saying goes, there is no sun or moon in the mountains. After an unknown period of time, the golden armored mirror image finally collapsed with a loud bang as he smashed his handsome face with a heavy punch. Then it turned into specks of light and dissipated on the martial arts arena. Qin Guang wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and sat on the ground, gasping for breath. When he looked at his reward points again, he could not help but be speechless. Unknowingly, he had spent more than 3,000 reward points on gold sore medicine and Red Bull. God knows how long it took him to kill the mirror image. Congratulations to the player for defeating himself and successfully killing the mirror image. You have received 30,000 reward points. With this prompt, the light curtain above his head gradually dissipated like a balloon under the sun. Seeing this, Qin Guang reluctantly sat up straight and calculated in his heart. He had mixed so miserably, the others were afraid that they would be even worse. This time he was afraid that there would be casualties. Finally, when the light curtain completely dissipated, Qin Guang suddenly realized that perhaps the flow of time in everyone's arena was not the same, because everyone's light curtain dissipated almost at the same time, but it was impossible for everyone to deal with the mirror image at the same speed, right? XX died reset. Died reset. Since entering the slaughter world, this was the first time that everyone had heard such a dense prompt. Everyone who had just been immersed in the joy of their survival suddenly felt a bone-chilling cold, and then there was a terrible silence. Qin Guang also silently counted in his heart. This time, a total of 7 people were lost, so hurt. Although the number of casualties in the beginning and the first mission was higher, in the later mission 2 and 3, the situation gradually stabilized, and everyone formed a tacit understanding with each other. At least in the hearts of most of the gamers, they had the thought of working together to overcome the difficulties together. The cruelest part was that after they had just established a relationship with each other, they had to face the tragedy of losing their comrades. Qin Guang was the first to stand up. Out of the 33 arenas of the ordinary gamers, there were 7 empty arenas. The contestants on the arenas were long gone. Everyone turned their attention to the virtual Protoss and saw that they were chatting and laughing as they jumped off the stage. They were happily gathered together. They didn't look like they had gone through a life-and-death ordeal. It was as relaxed as going out for a stroll. As for the casualties, there were no casualties. Everyone looked at their own dazed appearance and felt that it was extremely unreasonable. It was illogical. If it was a fair game and everyone had to surpass themselves to defeat the mirror image, the gods wouldn't be so relaxed. Is the difference between us and them that huge? We don't believe it. Mr. Dang this, why? Peasant pointed indignantly at the virtual Protoss. The round battle platform beneath her was descending slowly, but she didn't realize it. Based on what? Based on what? A strong member of the Hale and Hardy Elders team leaped onto an empty arena and walked around in a daze, trying to find some clues. But he couldn't find anything. The Hale and Hardy Elder came to the bottom of the arena, followed by 3 other members. The 4 of them looked at each other. Under the leadership of the Elder, the 6 of them had been together from the beginning. They had the most stable relationship and their teamwork was the best. They were confident that as long as they didn't encounter a violent attack that could destroy the other teams, they could work together and persevere to the end. But no matter how much they thought about it, they never would have thought that a mirror challenge that separated everyone would allow the brother with the strongest combat strength among the 6 of them to leave first. Moreover, there was no warning at all. They knew why he failed. It was because his awakened ability was explosive potential. Therefore, if everyone in the mirror challenge had to face their most extreme selves, then unfortunately, they would most likely have to face themselves who were always in their strongest state after activating their abilities. If he wanted to activate his ability, he would have to expend energy. After a long time, the energy would exceed his body's limit. It wasn't hard to imagine what would happen to him. Everyone calm down. There's no such thing as fairness in this game. I wasn't any better off than you guys. I almost failed miserably. Seeing that the atmosphere was too heavy, Qin Guang took the initiative to stand out to calm everyone down. After a short while, all the circular arenas returned to the ground. Everyone calculated their losses. Even Qin Guang felt that the situation was grim. The Hale and Hardy Elders team lost 1 member who was their strongest member. They were left with 5 members. Peasants' teams suffered greater losses. They lost 2 members and they were left with 4 members. Though there were many members in the mixed martial arts team, they suffered the heaviest losses. They lost 3 members and they were left with 12 members. The junior high school team also lost 1 member, and they were left with 3 members. At this moment, including Qin Guang, there were 25 ordinary players left, which was almost half the number when they first entered. Compared to the virtual gods, the normal gamers were in a terrible state. The more sad news was yet to come. Although everyone could exchange for the second awakening, it was extremely embarrassing that everyone finally discovered that the reward points needed for the third awakening were not 20,000 as they had imagined, but just like the first to the second awakening, it had increased by a full 100 times, becoming an outrageous 200,000. Qin Guang did not speak any further. At this point in time, if these people still couldn't adjust their mentality, then they deserved to die. They had to understand the same principle as him. No matter what happened, they could only deal with it when it came to soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. The more emotional they were, the more easily they would be swayed and the faster they would die. Nobody owed anyone anything. I'm very capable, but I won't always be your nanny without reservation. As an old grandpa of the novice village, I've already done my utmost. As Qin Guang's imagination ran wild, there was a violent quarrel in the distance. He looked up and saw the mixed martial arts coach's team. He didn't know what the mixed martial arts coach had asked for, but someone was questioning his decision. Why do you want me to exchange for a laser sword? Don't interfere with my decision. I have my own plans. I'm not a melee fighter. Don't be like this. We're a team. We have to maximize everyone's resources. Didn't I exchange for new combat boots for everyone? Don't joke around. The effect of your boots is only worth 20 points per pair, but my laser sword costs 1,000 points per pair. According to your request, if I have one each, I'll be in a passive position in the next mission. Not to mention that I can't use it myself. Don't be so hypocritical. Mr. Dang is right. You're just using us. The mixed martial arts coach was embarrassed. But you're already wearing my boots. Take it. Goodbye. From now on, I have nothing to do with you. After saying that, he threw his things and left. Unexpectedly, after he left, 2 more people followed him out. Obviously, these 3 people were close to each other from the beginning. Maybe they didn't trust the mixed martial arts coach from the beginning. Now that they had completed their second awakening, they felt that it was time to leave the mixed martial arts coach and work alone. At this moment, the electronic beep sounded again. At the same time, countless lights and shadows appeared in the Colosseum. Mission 5 is about to begin. Kill the mosquitoes. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, they could take a short break after waiting for a free question. Chapter 1173. Unlike the previous cockroaches, the floating light before the mosquitoes appeared was not stuck to the ground. Instead, it floated in the air like fireflies, surrounding everyone within it. The glimmering light floated quietly, making the arena that was filled with blood and slaughter look like a fairyland. But no one dared to relax too much. Everyone had just lost 7 companions not long ago, and with the precedent of the cockroach mission, everyone was still worried that there might be traps in the 5th mission, even though they thought that it was a freebie. Just like the cockroach mission. It looked cute and funny, but in fact, if it wasn't for Mr. Dang Wu who spared no effort in killing the monsters, everyone would have been sent to heaven. Thinking about it now gave them a lingering fear. So, it didn't matter if these mosquitoes were strong or not. They just had to catch them and kill them. The sooner they killed them, the better. After making up their minds, almost everyone acted as soon as the mosquitoes formed in the air. All kinds of fancy tricks flew in the air just like fireworks during the New Year. The 3 people who had left the team of MMA coaches were especially outstanding, especially the young man who had argued with the MMA coach. He was actually a magician. He rubbed his hands in front of his body in a strange gesture and mumbled something. Bursts of flames gradually appeared between his hands, becoming brighter and brighter. After a short while, a fireball the size of a human head actually jumped out from the place where his hands were rubbing. The fireball shot out, flying in the air and spreading out. When it was 5 or 6 meters away, it became a huge fireball with a diameter of more than 5 meters. Finally, it exploded 10 meters away. God knew how many mosquitoes he had burned to death. The other 2 people beside him were also very interesting. The man on his left was very tall, holding a huge shield in his left hand and a shining longsword in his right. It was probably the lightsaber that had caused the argument between the magician and the MMA coach. But the most eye-catching thing about this man wasn't the lightsaber, but the shield in his left hand. As a former WoW player, Qin Guang naturally recognized this thing. It was the legendary Azanatha's shield, also known as the door plank in Jianghu. For a long time, Azanatha's shield was the dream of all warrior players in World of Warcraft. Because of its unique appearance, it symbolized the identity of the main tank of a guild. It was the most important item to lead the entire party to challenge the Sunwell, and it was very popular in the game. Qin Guang didn't expect to see him here. He was surprised and cordial at the same time. This thing was really domineering. If it wasn't for the fact that his opponent was Mosquito this time, he would have definitely attracted the attention of countless people when he took out his battle shield. However, it looked a little comical now. The man on the magician's right held a long leather whip. That's right, it was a leather whip. At this time, the old man was waving his whip crazily, and the air was filled with dense crackling sounds. It sounded like several tens of thousands of firecrackers had been ignited. This person must be a circus animal trainer in real life, Qin Guang thought. It was a pity that he was not a priest, otherwise the three of them would form the legendary warrior, mage and priest golden triangle combination. What a pity. The boxing coach led another group of people and looked at the three of them coldly. He gritted his teeth in hatred. If the distribution of rewards for this fifth mission was exactly the same as the previous second mission, then whoever was faster and more ruthless in the team would get more mosquito heads, and of course the more benefits they would get in the end. These three people were supposed to be the new force on his side, especially the magician's big fireball. However, he really couldn't hold it in before. He was tempted by the laser sword in the shop that this guy had accidentally mentioned. He didn't expect to play right into his hands, giving him a legitimate opportunity to fall out with him. It was too late to salvage the situation now. It was a pity that Brother Spitfire had died tragically in the hands of the fell orcs. Otherwise, this fifth mission would be more suitable for him. The boxing coach turned his gaze to the distance again. There, the girl holding the low-grade elven warrior's bow was summoning a magic arrow and pulling the bowstring to its fullest. The next moment, the dazzling emerald magic arrow whizzed out, heading straight for the wall of the Colosseum in the distance. But before it hit the wall, the magic arrow made an inconceivable turn and circled around the Colosseum. It circled 3 or 4 times at an extremely fast speed before it slowly disappeared. It was obvious that the magic arrow had killed countless mosquitoes. Peasant clapped his hands, and the magic arrow girl blushed shyly and humbly. Then she continued to draw her bow and shoot. After the second awakening, not only did her bow and arrow level increase, but her magic arrow could also make a turn. Though there were only 4 members in Peasant's team, they were getting along well. The normal gamers weren't idle. The virtual Protoss also used various means, but they were at a disadvantage. Like Qin Guang, each of them had saved tens of thousands of reward points, but they couldn't spend a single cent. At the beginning, the gamers were fearful of their godly power. Now they were no longer mysterious. Only the divine Emperor Yu Ting was still invincible, but the other Protoss were no longer feared. Some of the more hot-tempered ordinary players were secretly tempted to find an opportunity to provoke the virtual gods. If they could kill 1 or 2 of them, it could be considered as revenge for the other players who had died tragically at the hands of the virtual gods. As for Qin Guang, he wasn't paying any attention to the others. It was so much so that he wasn't even trying his best to swat the mosquitoes. On the contrary, he would pinch them to death with every step he took. Furthermore, he would also occasionally slap those fellows that were courting death on his body. He was observing the changes in the mosquitoes and the evolution of the offense and defense between the normal gamers and the virtual Protoss. After the virtual Protoss' initial period of dominance, the normal gamers, who had grown stronger at an incredible speed, had reversed the situation. The gap between the two sides was still there, but it was getting smaller. The virtual Protoss led by the divine Emperor Yu Ting first suffered at the hands of Qin Guang. Now, because they couldn't use their abilities to strengthen themselves, they were gradually catching up. They also quickly lost their dignity as gods and became more cautious and careful. Qin Guang suddenly felt that the evolution of the two forces in this small ancient Roman Colosseum was very similar to the history of human evolution. A big country was stagnant because of some irresistible reason, but before that, they had ruthlessly bullied the small countries around them. The small countries that were bullied by the big countries didn't dare to speak out because of fear. However, with the help of some mysterious power, they grew stronger at a very fast speed and caught up. The big countries gradually felt threatened, but there was nothing they could do. The small countries held a grudge because of the previous encounter and could turn against them at any time. In addition, the mosquitoes weren't as simple as they looked. More and more mosquitoes surrounded him, so much so that even he couldn't kill every single one of them. He also found that even with the toughness of his skin, he couldn't stop the sneak attack of the mosquitoes. A few bumps were bitten on his calves and he felt a numb and itchy feeling. He raised his palm and slapped it down. When he raised his palm again, there were 8 dark red blood balls on it. They were 8 bloated guys that had sucked a lot, and it was very annoying to look at. Although he wouldn't be knocked down by the mosquitoes with his ability, Qin Guang simply circulated his internal energy and wrapped it around his whole body, not giving the mosquitoes any chance. Then he carefully observed the changes in the parts of his body that had been bitten. A few minutes later, his expression changed drastically, and his calves became a little weak. The health points that he had lost could not be replenished in a short time by relying on the talent ability of the Earth Burner. The damage he had suffered was greater than he had imagined, and the poison of these words was strange. After being bitten by the mosquitoes and injected poison into the body, even his physique would become weak, let alone others. As expected, Qin Guang turned his head to look in the direction of the others. The originally aggressive group of normal players was now on the verge of collapsing. Many of the weaker players found it difficult to even stand. These small teams had gone from taking the initiative to attack at the beginning to gathering together, trying their best to resist the invasion of the mosquitoes. But they were not the worst off. The virtual Protoss were even worse off. Yu Ting was anxiously busying around. The other virtual Protoss, who had been insufferably arrogant, were gathered together. Many of them had already fallen and they looked very weak. Many of the Protoss had already exchanged for gold sore medicine and Red Bull in an attempt to recover, but to no avail. Even Qin Guang, with his recovery ability as the Earth Burner, could not easily recover, let alone a mere Red Bull. After a while, the number of mosquitoes on the side of the normal players gradually decreased. It was not that they had made any progress in killing the mosquitoes, but that the black mass of mosquitoes in the sky had almost all gathered on the side of the virtual Protoss. At this moment, most of the virtual Protoss had already collapsed to the ground. They no longer had any strength to resist. Only Yu Ting was bathed in lightning, charging left and right. Everywhere he went there was a bright light and countless mosquitoes exploded and died. But the area he could cover was limited and the mosquitoes were everywhere. There were always more mosquitoes that pounced on the bodies of the other Protoss, biting and gnawing at them. On the contrary, the normal players, who were getting more and more relaxed, laughed when they saw this. Every dog has its day. You bunch of arrogant bull-nosed Protoss had your day? Weren't you all very capable? Weren't you all cocky? Look at you all. We don't pity you at all. Qin Guang frowned as he watched this scene. He did not say a word. This scene was a little like a large group of people taking a walk in the woods on a hot day. Those with type O blood were bitten all over, while those with type B blood did not feel anything. They even mocked those with type O blood for being mosquito coils in human form. It was good to finally see the virtual Protoss in trouble. However, as the Redeemer who had immersed himself in the world in a cup, Qin Guang felt that something was amiss. Mr. Dang, why don't we take advantage of his weakness and kill him? The boxing instructor was tempted, but he didn't dare to make a decision. He ran to Qin Guang and asked. The hale and hearty elder walked forward. This time he shared the same opinion as the boxing instructor. That's right. Those who are not of our race have different intentions. Many of our comrades died tragically at their hands. It's time to take revenge. Peasant, the junior high school student, and the fireball magician did not express their opinions. They looked at Qin Guang and waited for him to make a decision. All Qin Guang had to do was give the order, and everyone would make use of this opportunity to deal a heavy blow to the other party. Even if they couldn't, they wouldn't be able to put up any resistance against the mosquitoes. Qin Guang shook his head. Don't worry. The situation is strange. I'll go and take a look. Chapter 1174. What's so strange about that? Their blood smells better and the mosquitoes love them more. I noticed before that their blood color is different from ours. Who knows what kind of creatures they are? The genius junior high school student interjected. Didn't they say it themselves? Divine race. Alright, calm down, I'll go take a look. I don't know if you noticed, but the mosquitoes around the divine race are flying faster and bigger. As Qin Guang spoke, he walked forward. The sniper following the hale and hearty old man took out his big sniper rifle and looked through the scope. He nodded vigorously. That's right. Mr. Dang's observation skills are really sharp. Yu Ting, what do you want to say now? Qin Guang walked to the front of the gods, and if he took another step forward, he would be met with the densely packed mosquitoes that looked like a black cloud in the sky. These small insects were crazily squeezing into the center, but they ignored Qin Guang, who was right in front of them. It was a strange sight. The buzzing sound was even more deafening than the noisiest workshop. If a normal person stood here they would probably go deaf. Yuting ignored Qin Guang. He continued to charge left and right like a bolt of lightning. Seeing that he was ignoring him, Qin Guang knew that he was arrogant. He felt that gods should not ask mortals for help, so he refused to speak. Qin Guang was in no hurry to act. He stood outside with his hands behind his back, watching calmly. Of course, Yuting knew that Qin Guang was close. But just as Qin Guang had expected, he was the most noble god emperor in the endless god realm. He could not bring himself to do this. Although Dang Wu's identity was extraordinary, and he could take the initiative to form an alliance with him and ask for help, this was not just his problem. But this wasn't just about him. It was also about the mortals who stood behind him. The gods who were lying on the ground, covered in mosquitoes, looked in the direction of Qin Guang's voice with anger and indignation. They were even more resentful and humiliated than Yuting. But they could not stop their divine power from flowing out. Many of them did not even have the strength to exchange for Red Bulls and pour them into their mouths. They even had a feeling that their projections were going to die here in an incomparably sullen manner. However, they still gritted their teeth and held on. None of them asked the divine Emperor Yuting to ask the humans for help. Alright, can you stop being so stubborn? I didn't even ask you to beg me. As long as you say that you can't hold on any longer, I'll start thinking of a way, right? Qin Guang spoke again. But Yuting still didn't move. He simply waved his hand and sent out a bolt of lightning, clearing away the mosquitoes on her body. He then looked at his subordinate. Her eyes were closed and she seemed to have lost consciousness. Her originally chubby face in the projection of a little girl had become slightly thinner. A strong sense of helplessness welled up in Yuting's heart. Although he already knew that this so-called game wouldn't be easy, he never dreamed that an incomparably noble god would fall at the hands of such a laughable little bug. The mosquitoes that even mortals looked down upon could actually take the lives of gods like them. Pray to mortals for help? Stop joking. Go. I don't need your help. These laughable bugs can't hurt us at all. Yuting purposely said in a loud voice, but he secretly gulped down 2 bottles of Red Bull, allowing the lightning to cover every part of his body again. Qin Guang was also convinced. It seemed that these gods cared more about their faces than their lives. Perhaps their arrogance was their weakness? Forget it, that's not important. I'll just quietly watch them die. The sooner they die, the sooner they can be reincarnated. That way, I won't have to worry about them in the future. After waiting for a long time, the black cloud formed by the mosquitoes became a little smaller. Yuting's desperate killing had finally achieved some results. But the lightning inside was slowly becoming dimmer and dimmer. Qin Guang changed his mind. He suddenly had a real desire to kill. If he could, it seemed that he could really kill these hidden threats of the virtual gods in the 5th mission. That seemed like a good idea. Why not just watch them die? There were still 4 missions left after the mosquitoes. Maybe, probably not too scary, right? I don't need to cooperate with these unlucky gods' projections to complete the mission, right? Calculating with his fingers, it might be a little difficult. Just like that, Qin Guang answered his own question and gradually started to waver. Forget it. I'll see what changes have happened to these mosquitoes first. Circulating his inner strength to protect his palms, he reached forward casually and grabbed one in the air. He held it in front of him with his index finger and thumb. Sure enough, this thing was really bigger. Crushing this thing, Qin Guang actually felt the incredible power of gods from his fingertips. This damn thing was going against the heavens. Not only could it suck blood, but it could also absorb divine power. If this continued, wouldn't the virtual gods be completely sucked dry and turn into the legendary invincible mosquitoes? This 5th mission seemed like a free point for ordinary players, but for the virtual gods, it was a difficult problem. It was a bit like asking foreign high school students to do Chinese junior high school students' reading comprehension. Chinese junior high school students looked so simple, but the foreigners just wanted to die. Mosquitoes had limited damage to ordinary people. They could only suck blood, but everything had its weakness. They could actually absorb the power of gods as nutrients to complete self-strengthening. This was very scary. Qin Guang crushed a few more mosquitoes to death. The results were the same. They were all big guys that had mutated and become stronger. The mosquitoes gathered here had all sucked the blood of the virtual gods once and did not die. This discovery made Qin Guang feel bad. Suddenly, he found a particularly large mosquito in the mosquito pile in front of him. He reached in and pinched it. When he pulled it out and squeezed hard, he felt a sharp pain in his fingertips. Looking down, the black guy in his hand, the size of a fingernail, was shining with a metallic light. It had pierced through the protection of his inner strength. What stung his fingertips was not its needle, but its torso and wings. He attached more inner strength to his fingers and even condensed it on his fingernails. He used a move he learned from the realm of true martial that was similar to the Nine White Bone Claw. Only then did he crush the tough old mosquito to death. Immediately, Qin Guang sucked in a breath of cold air and looked up at the black cloud in front of him. He saw another big guy of the same size, but it did not rush inside. This guy was killing and gnawing on its own kind. In the short few seconds that Qin Guang looked over, this big guy had used its needle to completely suck its own kind dry, and then turned its target to another mosquito next to it. But Qin Guang did not give it a chance. This time he used the Nine White Bone Claw from the beginning and grabbed it fiercely, pulling it out. This time Qin Guang used a greater force to crush it to death. Then he turned around, took a deep breath and shouted, "Not good. Everyone come here. Hurry up and come here. Attack these damn mosquitoes with all your might. Otherwise all of us will die." What a joke. Up until now, none of the virtual gods had been sucked dry. The divine Emperor Yu Ting was still resisting stubbornly, but there were already mutated mosquitoes that could penetrate his protective shield. Only God knew how many of these ferocious mosquitoes were evolving crazily in the black cloud. If they were allowed to suck the virtual gods dry, even he would not be able to deal with these mosquitoes. The real test of Mission 5 was whether the ordinary players and the virtual gods could let go of their grudges and pride and go from opposing each other to working together. Otherwise everyone would die together. Hearing his shout, Peasant and the hale and hearty old man led the team and ran over without hesitation. The remaining ordinary players slowly approached Qin Guang. Clearly they didn't know the severity of the situation. They were somewhat reluctant to see Qin Guang helping the Protoss. Qin Guang looked at them coldly and said, "If you want to die, tell me earlier. Do you think I'm joking? These damn mosquitoes are becoming stronger. Now they can even harm me. No. I can't hold on any longer. Help us. If you want to survive this damned massacre mission, we have to work together. I admit that I shouldn't have treated you that way, but from now on, we have to work together." Yu Ting's voice finally resounded from the depths of the clouds, and Qin Guang could even vaguely see a green radiance. The gods had suffered serious casualties. This was the last straw that broke Yu Ting's back. Yu Ting had told the other gods not to take this mission lightly, but he wasn't any better. Now that he had to pay the price, he was willing to let go of his arrogance. Did you hear that? Whether it's because you don't want to die or to earn reward points, it's best to use your trump cards. We have to kill all of them before they finish eating all the delicacies in their eyes. Otherwise we'll be dead. As Qin Guang said this, he suddenly turned around and pushed out with his palm. 2 waves of inner strength shot out from his palm and actually created a hole in the black cloud in front of him. However, no one paid attention to how he got his firmament palm, or what ability he used. No one was amazed by the power of this move. Everyone just stared at the gap with incomparably serious expressions. In the gap, there were at least more than 10 big fellows that were about 2 fingers in size. Their entire bodies were glowing with bright silver light as they quietly flew in the air. They were completely unaware of the palm force that Qin Guang had just struck out. They were only at a loss as to why there was suddenly no one of their own that they could prey on. They swayed as they flew around randomly for a while. Then they immediately flew forward like lightning, pouncing into the black mass of mosquitoes. See that? They've evolved again. This time, we're not facing those ridiculous cockroaches from the second mission. Do you still think we can just stand by and watch? Qin Guang stretched out his finger and pointed at the 10 or so daunting big fellows, and squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. As he spoke, there was a sudden flash of green light from inside. Another virtual Protoss had fallen to these ridiculous mosquitoes. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a crisp sound next to him. The female magic archer standing next to him had already pulled the bowstring to the fullest and was the first to attack the black cloud. "Let's do it or we'll really die. Everyone move faster." At this time the MMA coach stood up and acted as his leader again. But no one paid attention to him. He was a melee ability user. When it came to dealing with mosquitoes, if he was not willing to use his reward points to buy some treasures in his shop system, his role would be no different from a cheerleader. For a moment, many ability users with long-range skills, especially those who could release flames, were using all kinds of means. At this time, countless mosquitoes were gathered together, which provided great convenience for these ability users. For example, the fireball thrown by the magician was even more effective, as it blew up a whole swarm of mosquitoes. The guy who used a sniper rifle before was also very impressive. He actually bought a military flamethrower from the reward point shop. He aimed it at the mosquito pile and burned it. Although it couldn't burn the more evolved ones, it could filter out the weaker ones like a filter. It was very effective. The MMA coach asked him if he could buy another one as a loan of reward points. The gamer said sullenly, "Apologies, the shop is limited to one." The MMA coach could only watch anxiously. He wasn't the only one who was anxious. Peasant could only stand at the back of the crowd, unable to move forward. Though the mosquitoes were only targeting the Protoss, if one of them barged in and attracted the attention of the insects, no one would be able to withstand the attack of countless evolved mosquitoes. While the melee ability users were at their wits' end, the sneaky genius high school student and the fat home appliance guy finally made a move. The fat home appliance guy raised his hand and shouted, "Big guy, come to me. I've just developed the super electric mosquito swatter. 10 bottles of Red Bull for one. Everyone come and collect." Everyone went forward, puzzled. They didn't know what he meant. The fat home appliance guy laughed and didn't explain. He spread out his hands and said, "Here, 10 bottles of Red Bull for one. I only collect the production fee, not the processing fee." Now that everyone was rich, 10 reward points were nothing. Peasant took out his reward points to see what the fat home appliance guy was up to. The fat home appliance guy's hand was suspended in the air, and below his palm was the legendary 3D printing light that looked like a laser scanner. With his other hand he poured the Red Bull into his mouth. His movements were fast and his stomach was like a bottomless pit. The Red Bull wasn't a real Red Bull. It looked like a liquid and tasted the same, but when it entered his stomach, it would turn into pure energy. 20 seconds later, the fat home appliance guy handed the legendary super electric mosquito to Peasant and said, "Please enjoy." Peasant took the sign and walked briskly to the side of the black cloud. He raised the sign and swung it forward. When the electric mosquito swatter hit the black cloud, there was a crackling sound. Wherever the electric mosquito swatter passed, there was an explosion of lightning and thunder like the Milky Way. The electric mosquito swatter left a half-meter dent in the black cloud. The electric mosquito swatter was abnormally powerful. The battery in the handle of the normal electric mosquito swatter could only last for 0.1 seconds. The fat home appliance guy worked on the second electric mosquito swatter and said proudly, "How is it? Didn't I say it's super powerful?" Qin Guang, who was striking the cloud-expelling palm, was shocked by the power of the electric mosquito swatter. It was beyond the power of the fat home appliance guy. After that, Qin Guang turned to look at the genius high school student. Unlike the fatty who was in high spirits, the high school student seemed dispirited and exhausted. Perhaps the genius high school student's ability was to upgrade and modify other people's abilities. Could the fat home appliance guy modify the normal electric mosquito swatter into a super powerful version? Because it was a modified version, it didn't conform to normal scientific principles. It was a magical item, so the energy required to produce one was higher than that of a microwave oven. With the support of the ammunition provided by the fat home appliance guy, the gamers who lacked special means were no longer spectators. The lightning in the black cloud became dimmer and dimmer. Occasionally, there were bursts of green light that signified the death of the Protoss. At first, the busy gamers were gloating. However, as time went by, the gamers felt a chill down their spines. Such a powerful god race was only targeted by the slaughter mission once, and he actually died so silently and miserably. Ordinary people like them were extremely lucky to be able to survive from the first mission until now. Unknowingly, the gamers stole glances at Qin Guang, who was striking the black cloud tirelessly. Many of them thought to themselves, although Sir Dang has a bad temper, if it wasn't for him, they would have all died long ago. Chapter 1175. For the players outside, they were currently enjoying the pleasure of harvesting the loot. The evolving mosquitoes looked terrifying, but in the eyes of ordinary players, they were nothing more than living targets that could withstand grass. If they couldn't kill the mosquitoes in one shot, they would kill the mosquitoes that could be killed first. Those that couldn't be killed would be left aside for the mosquitoes to escape. As time passed, the black cloud of mosquitoes became smaller. Initially, it was 100 meters in diameter, but now it was only 10 meters in diameter. The deeper the mosquitoes were, the harder it was to deal with them. Apart from that, the magic arrows of the elven archers were also dealing less and less damage to the mosquitoes. In the beginning, she could kill at least tens of thousands of mosquitoes with a single arrow. Later, the number decreased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Now she could only kill a few dozen mosquitoes with a single arrow. She didn't know the reason. After observing the situation, she inhaled a cold breath and said, "Oh my God! The mosquitoes are dodging my mana arrows." The fireball magician nodded and said, "Don't be surprised. The mosquitoes in front of me have turned fiery red. They are resistant to my fire mana. What kind of evolution speed is this? A man who was holding the electric mosquito swatter provided by the fat man said in horror, "The effect of the electric mosquito swatter is getting worse. It's unbelievable. The mosquitoes in front of me can discharge electricity." Peasant nodded and said, "This isn't a simple discharge. They have evolved to store electricity. They absorb the electricity from the electric mosquitoes and release it to the surface of their bodies to form electric plasma." The hale and hearty elder nodded and said, "That's scary. If the mosquitoes attack us, we won't be able to defend against them." The Sonda coach, who was wearing the new combat uniform he had exchanged for, interrupted, "So, everyone hurry up and give it your all. The situation isn't looking good." "There's no need for you to say it. Even a blind person can see that we've already used all our means, but we're almost at our wits' end against these mosquitoes." Mr. Dang said that the evolved mosquitoes can penetrate his defense. If we were in their shoes, we would be defeated in the blink of an eye. Don't forget that their venom is strange. So we really should move faster. Also, have you noticed that the light that appears from time to time means that some Protoss have fallen? According to my calculations, there are at least 10 Protoss who have died in there. That's right. God knows how terrifying these mosquitoes will become if all the Protoss are sucked dry. The Sonda coach seized the opportunity to make his presence known again. Chen Guang was really convinced by this group of chatterboxes. People who didn't know what was going on would really think that they had a sense of urgency just by listening to them. But you have to talk less nonsense. The less these unlucky mosquitoes talk, the more they die. I say if you want to have a meeting, you can wait until Mission 5 is over and then slowly have a summary meeting. Can't you be a little more serious, a little more urgent? Can't you see that the gods inside are almost all dead? Are you going to have a picnic or a tea party? Chen Guang really couldn't control his temper when faced with these talkative fellows at critical moments. He was very angry and couldn't care less about his temperament as an expert. After being scolded by him, everyone hurriedly got to work. The lightning that burst out from Yu Ting's body still hadn't been extinguished. As expected of the leader of the Protoss Advance Party, he definitely had some trump cards up his sleeves. He had actually lasted until now without running out of stamina. But Chen Guang could also imagine his indignation and resentment. In his advance party, most of the Protoss didn't seem to be his subordinates from the celestial realm and weren't close to him. But he was a god after all. How shameless and arrogant was he? Leading a team out to cause trouble with mortals that they looked down on, and in the end, a nest of his comrades died. If it were him, he would definitely feel very embarrassed and humiliated. Also, even at this time, this guy was still trying to save his face and suffer. If it were him, he would definitely be so anxious that he would try his best to give the only reinforcements outside, which were the mortals, some kind of flattery. He would say that as long as they could save them, he would thank them on behalf of the gods, and he would definitely reward them after the matter was over. In short, he would try to trick as many of them as he could. Say, a bunch of your subordinates have already died, so why are you still pretending to be a big shot? At this time, Chen Guang had completely figured out Yu Ting's mentality. He was indeed very anxious, but he didn't want to show his panic in front of mortals. Apart from that, Yu Ting also felt that the weaker and more useless he appeared, the more likely these mortals would treat him like they were watching a show. Perhaps they were only afraid of Dang Jin's prestige and had no choice but to help. Many mortals probably hoped that all of the Protoss would die. If this was a different situation, and these ordinary players were in danger, Yu Ting couldn't decide whether he would lead all of the Protoss to save them like he did with Dang Jin. Even he himself felt that this change in his state of mind was exceptionally inconceivable. In the celestial realm, he was the emperor of the gods, and he had an incredibly strong and indestructible spiritual will. He would never be shaken by anything. Even when he lost his best friend and comrade many years ago, his heart never wavered. But this time, ever since he came to this extremely strange and narrow space in the form of a projection and participated in this so-called game, Yu Ting found that he had changed. Although he still despised mortals in his bones, he had to admit that he had become like one. He began to be easily angered, and he began to have some unnecessary emotional feelings in his heart. He even knew that this so-called arrogance was also a manifestation of his emotions. When a real god faced an ant, he would not have any emotional fluctuations. He would not be angry, nor would he look down on them. He would not even have so-called arrogance. Just like how a mortal would not be angry at an ant in his eyes, a real god should have this mentality when facing a mortal. Yu Ting didn't notice this before, but now he finally realized that he wasn't the only one who had changed. The other Protoss in the advance party were even worse than he was. Yu Ting looked at Noon, who was shooting out his palms and getting closer and closer to him and the fallen gods behind him. He couldn't help but wonder if it was the gods who had fallen, or if it was the talented mortals who had ascended in this game. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, he suddenly felt a sharp pain from the back of his waist. Yu Ting reached back and grabbed a palm-sized silver mosquito. He picked it up and squeezed it in his palm. Like usual, he exerted a little force and at the same time, his palm surged with the power of lightning. He tried to easily kill this reckless fellow. But his face revealed an expression of extreme shock. He didn't manage to crush it to death. What kind of joke is this? Yu Ting was shocked. He gritted his teeth and continued to exert more force, using at least twice the force he used before he managed to crush the mosquito to death with great difficulty. After all, this was just one mosquito. The sound of Dang Jin's palms was still several meters away, and Yu Ting didn't know how long it would take for him to kill his way in. Yu Ting thought to himself, am I really going to die here in such a ridiculous manner? Forget it, even if the price of losing a projection is heavy, if I can rely on my own godly power to nourish a powerful mosquito that mortals can't defend against, and let Dang Jin die here as well, doesn't that seem like a good ending? Why don't I just give up on resisting? Once this thought was born, it rapidly grew in Yu Ting's heart. As Qin Guang fought, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. Yu Ting didn't make a sound. He couldn't have died, could he? Qin Guang cursed inwardly. He wasn't worried for these gods who deserved to die, but for his own fate. If you die, then die. Don't drag me down with you. Yu Ting, are you still alive? Give me some reaction. Qin Guang yelled at the top of his lungs, but no one paid any attention to him. Even the lightning, which had never been extinguished, had completely dimmed. It's over. Is that idiot God Emperor really going to die? Friends, something's happened, something's really happened. That idiot God Emperor is about to die. I just caught a big guy. You guys can come and take a look. Qin Guang held a giant silver mosquito like the one God Emperor Yu Ting had once squashed to death and retreated outside. I can bet you $10,000 that none of you can last 5 seconds under this mosquito's mouth. Qin Guang squeezed the struggling big guy tightly. Electricity surged in his palm, mixed with various kinds of divine power. It looked colorful and exceptionally terrifying. This thing had sucked up at least 1,000 of its kind and had evolved to a terrifying degree. It was no weaker than the one that had pierced through Yu Ting. Do you guys want to try its power? Qin Guang asked as he increased the strength of his fingers. Everyone shook their heads. Then let's go all out. Now that all the Protoss have become real fertilizer, these things are going to evolve crazily. Once they're sucked dry, what awaits us is this thing or even stronger. After Qin Guang finished speaking, he suddenly exerted force in his palm. His inner force burst forth and he suddenly crushed the big guy to death. Then he flew back inside. Behind him were countless ordinary players who had completely unleashed all their potential and were madly pouncing on him. Couldn't keep up physically? No way. There was Red Bull. Was it hard to keep pouring Red Bull into your mouth? It didn't matter. Not long ago, someone had redeemed 100 bottles at once, triggering the mysterious clause in the reward point shop. The legendary upgraded version of Red Bull had appeared. Viagra Sustained Release Capsule. Upgraded version of Red Bull Physical Recovery Potion. Suitable for men and women, young and old. Anyone who uses it will know that love lasts forever. 100 reward points for one capsule, and the effect was 100 times that of Red Bull. After swallowing it, it would not take effect immediately. Instead, it would gradually release its effect as the user's physical strength was consumed. Of course, with everyone's physical strength strengthened after the second awakening, the body's energy consumption was also much greater than before. When everyone first came to the slaughtering world, a bottle of Red Bull could restore all their physical strength. As for now, if it weren't for the appearance of the Viagra Sustained Release Capsule, everyone would really be extremely distressed. They could only hold a bottle in one hand and a weapon in the other. The Sustained Release Capsule was indeed a good thing. It was just that the product manual was slightly retarded. Finally, after a full 10 minutes, Qin Guang and the others finally cleared most of the mutant mosquitoes on the periphery. They finally saw a scene that made their teeth ache. There were about a dozen big guys left on the scene and each one was the size of a human head. As for the Protoss, they had lost nearly half of their numbers. There were about 20 Protoss lying on the ground. On average, there were 2 or 3 big guys lying on each virtual Protoss. Among them, the most eye-catching one was Emperor Yu Ting, who stood at the forefront of all the virtual Protoss. He had completely lost consciousness but still did not fall. Even if this guy wanted to die, he refused to fall because he wanted to save face. His originally tall and strong body had become as thin as a stick. It was as if there was only an empty frame left. His blonde hair fluttered in the wind, and his handsome square face also showed an extremely sickly look. He looked like a critically ill patient with protruding cheekbones and sunken eyes. Unlike other virtual Protoss, there were at least 10 of them lying on Yu Ting's body. However, at this time Qin Guang did not sympathize with him at all because he realized that this guy had not really lost his ability to resist. Damn it, I've seen stupid people, but I've never seen such an idiot. He actually planned to feed the mosquitoes and let them deal with me? Stop joking. Idiot. Everyone attack. Qin Guang roared and took the lead, charging forward. Yu Ting, stop pretending. I know you can still move. As he charged, Qin Guang shouted. As expected, Emperor Yu Ting opened his eyes slightly. You actually saw through me. Nonsense, do you think I'm stupid? You clenched your fists so tightly that the veins on the back of your hands are popping. I'm not blind. As Qin Guang spoke, he ruthlessly struck Yu Ting with his palm. Although Yu Ting looked extremely weak, Qin Guang knew that his palm would not be able to kill him. A skinny camel was still bigger than a horse, and Yu Ting's skin was thick. The wind from Yu Ting's palm struck him, but the 10 or so big gold and silver guys hanging on his body did not move at all. You guys are going against the heavens. Flashing behind Yu Ting, Qin Guang raised his leg and kicked Yu Ting's butt. The sound of a cannonball was heard and Yu Ting flew out. This time, the mosquitoes hanging on his body finally broke free unwillingly. However, they did not care about Qin Guang, who had interrupted their meal. They were like moths flying into a flame as they pounced on Yu Ting, who was flying in the distance. I'll deal with these 10 mosquitoes. I'll leave the rest to you. No matter what, we can't let them evolve. Qin Guang casually said to the players before pouncing forward. Behind him, the electrical appliance fat man screamed in delight, Everyone! I've released a new product. The gamers were elated. What? An improved version of the superheated electric mosquito repellent incense burner. The gamers staggered and almost fell to the ground. What kind of innate ability was that? What about the mosquito repellent incense tablets? Peasant grasped the key point. The electrical appliance fat man laughed smugly and said, It's not tablets, it's liquid. It's a mosquito repellent that comes with the supermarket. It's the same with me. Qin Guang, who had reached Yu Ting before the huge mosquitoes, gave the electrical appliance fat man a thumbs up. He was a genius. As he looked at the 10 approaching huge mosquitoes, Qin Guang inhaled deeply. It was time to show his true skills. Come on, scoundrel. Eat the old man's 18 mosquito subduing palms. The gamers might not believe that his moves were called the 18 mosquito subduing palms and not Mr. Jin's 18 dragon subduing palms. This was one of the unorthodox moves that he had learned from the 400,000 unique skills of the world of true martial. It came from a martial emperor who had lived in the primeval forest for most of his life and fought with mosquitoes. This move was extremely stupid to use against people, but it was extremely effective against mosquitoes, especially those that were large in size and could fly very fast. Chapter 1176. There were thousands of skills in the world. Even if it was the art of making meatballs, as long as it was practiced to the extreme, it could be filmed and uploaded to the internet. It would shock countless people. The 18 palm of subduing mosquitoes that Qin Guang displayed at this time was also the pinnacle of human skills, condensed from the thousands of years of hard work of that martial emperor. The realm of true martial was a very mysterious world, and Qin Guang had dealt with many strange-looking monsters in it. Only the heavens knew how the unlucky martial emperor in the world in the cup was able to come up with such a despicable martial art. He had locked himself in the primeval forest for his entire life, dealing with strange mosquitoes that were at least the size of a palm, but in the end he managed to come up with such an unorthodox martial art. He practiced it, but after he mastered it he did not spread it, and let this lost skill be buried with his grave in the depths of the mountains. If it were not for the fact that Qin Guang had to complete 400,000 lost skills in the realm of true martial and spend a lot of effort to find it and learn it, no one in the entire realm of true martial would know that there was such a strange martial emperor. When he first learned this skill, Qin Guang almost thought that this skill would never see the light of day, but he did not expect to encounter such a rare opportunity today. At this time, under the momentary excitement, his shout was so loud that ordinary players in the distance could hear it clearly. It's the 18 palm of subduing dragons. Mr. Dang, don't you dare change the name of the skill. A martial arts enthusiast in the team of MMA coaches shouted angrily. Qin Guang lightly hit out his palm as if he was caressing a girl and said, Don't worry about me, mind your own business. Hurry up and do it. Don't let the Protoss die again. He hit the first golden giant mosquito in front of him with a seemingly gentle palm, but it hit the aggressive big guy in the face. In addition, Qin Guang's right index and middle fingers happened to open, just enough for the giant mosquito's needle to pass through the gap between his fingers. In the next moment, the giant mosquito screamed and flew backward. There were two things that surprised everyone. Firstly, the mosquito had not died after taking a direct hit from Mr. Wu, nor had it been blasted. Secondly, could it be that the 18 mosquito subduing palms that Mr. Wu mentioned was true? Otherwise, how could he have thought of this move so skillfully? He swatted the mosquito away with one hand, and then used his two fingers to forcefully break the syringe? However, just as everyone continued to exclaim in surprise, they saw that the giant golden mosquito that was slapped flew back 10 meters. It shook its head and flew back again in high spirits. This damn thing's syringe actually grew back. Everyone was dumbfounded, and even Qin Guang was startled by this scene. However, he didn't have the time to care about the giant golden mosquito that had recovered. Not far from him, the other 7 or 8 giant mosquitoes of different colors had already pounced over. However, not a single one of them took the initiative to attack him. Instead, they all directly and efficiently moved around him, directly pouncing towards Yu Ting, who was behind him. "Noon, you better get out of the way. I failed my mission. I don't need your sympathy and I don't need you to save me. I shouldn't have asked you for help in the first place. If I were you, I would have let him rest and recuperate, waiting for the real battle." Yu Ting's weak voice sounded behind Qin Guang, sounding quite righteous. Qin Guang turned around and spat at his face. "Stop pretending. Do you think I don't know what you're planning? You probably already felt that there's something fishy about this 5th mission, right? You know that if we watch you all die, we won't end up well, right? I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter whether you understand or not. Anyway, before this is over, you can't die." Qin Guang roared, then turned around to face the swarm of mosquitoes. He circulated all the inner strength in his body, and at the same time, stuffed 10 Viagra slow-release capsules into his mouth. Then he slapped his palms into the air again and again. Streaks of inky black energy surged out from his palms, turning into numerous dragons that moved left and right in the air. They crashed into the giant mosquitoes and sent them flying far away. However, these giant mosquitoes weren't ordinary people. Although the scene looked spectacular, they didn't die. They flapped their wings slightly and flew back, each of them as tough as iron. Ever since he had entered the slaughter world, although he had appeared very powerful, he had never used his full strength in front of an outsider like he was now. He had continuously released the power of his vital qi. The ordinary players looked at the inky black energy that filled the sky. For a moment, the scene was like a Wuxia movie. Qin Guang was also speechless. These mosquitoes weren't mosquitoes, they were clearly the Gundam of mosquitoes. The miniature Gundam. Wait, what are those idiots doing? Qin Guang, who was using all his strength to defend Yu Ting against the 10 giant mosquitoes, caught a glimpse of a green light from the corner of his eyes. Only then did he realize that the idiotic players had yet to attack the giant mosquitoes that were still crawling on the bodies of the other Protoss players. They were all watching his performance. "I say, do you really want to go against the heavens? Why do you think I'm working so hard? I really want to anger you to death. Don't look at me, mind your own business." As he scolded, Qin Guang slapped away the giant mosquitoes. At the same time, he had to look at the changes in the Protoss that had just died. Previously, when these people died, they were covered by the black cloud of mosquitoes, so he couldn't see them clearly. Now he could barely see them. That's weird. Although there was a green liquid like when I killed the Titan, why wasn't it absorbed by the sand in the arena? Instead, it turned into dust and disappeared into the air like normal players? What's going on here? But he didn't have time to figure out the trick behind it. The 10 mosquitoes in front of him seemed to be gradually angered by their failure to attack. Even the sound of their flapping wings became more ear-piercing, and their flying speed became 3 times faster than before. The only good news was that after he scolded them, the normal players finally started to move. Apart from the fat man and the genius high school student, the other 20 or so people all held a liquid mosquito killer. Only God knew how this thing was powered. They waved the mosquito killer in their hands, the indicator lights flashing wildly, and rushed forward. Then, they aimed the smoke of the mosquito killer at the Protoss who was lying on the ground. Then, everyone took out their weapons and used their abilities to attack the giant mosquitoes on the Protoss. At this time, the close combat awakened metahumans showed their advantage. They didn't have time to think about whether or not the Protoss should remove the syringes slowly. They just used a hammer, a kick, or Azanatha's powerful shield, or a whip that dragged the bodies of the giant mosquitoes and flung them. In short, with everyone using all sorts of methods, the mosquitoes on the Protoss all fell off. But not a single one died. They circled in the air and continued to pounce on the ground. Just as everyone was marveling at the tenacity of these mosquitoes, there was a sudden flash in the air. A silver mosquito started to evolve under everyone's watchful eyes. In less than 3 seconds, this thing's body split open, and a golden thing jumped out like a cicada shedding its shell. As for the shell it had shed, it turned into the most primitive energy in the air and was sucked back like a reverse waterfall. The golden giant mosquito grew even larger in the air. These things are stronger. I recognize this one. It's the one that killed a god with a few others. Everyone, think of a way to kill it. I understand, but we can't break their defense at all. Driving them away is already our limit. At this time, the boxing coach kicked the golden giant mosquito that was hanging on the lowly goddess Vasani with all his might. He said, "Let me tell you another piece of unfortunate news. If the giant mosquito turns gold, it can completely ignore us. I can't fight it at all." In front of him, the little girl Vasani was lying quietly. There were at least 5 golden mosquitoes hanging on her body. Why are you saving her? Don't worry about other things. It's better if she dies first. This little girl is very sinister. The sniper of the hale and hearty old man's team reminded. The boxing coach suddenly understood. That's right. With that he turned and left. Qin Guang saw this and felt helpless. This little girl goddess was very close to Yu Ting. If she died, the consequences would be very serious. It wasn't that Yu Ting's anger was worth caring about, but that Yu Ting was a god emperor. This meant that Vasani was not a simple person. She had to be at least a god emperor to be able to talk to Yu Ting. Then, this projection of her must have the most god power in the highest level. She was only second to Yu Ting's chicken. If these giant golden mosquitoes were allowed to eat her until they were full, what awaited them might very well be the next stage that had never appeared before. Just the golden ones alone were so difficult to deal with. The next stage would most likely be eating people. But at this time he couldn't just leave Yu Ting alone. He could only say loudly, "Everyone listen up. No matter what, we must get rid of these 5 mosquitoes. Do you hear me? Otherwise, Mr. Dang, I have a better idea." Qin Guang grabbed one tightly with one hand and continued to shoot out black energy with the other. He replied, "Speak. Isn't the reason why we want to save them because we don't want them to become nutrients for the strange mosquitoes? If that's the case, then we can kill the gods first. Then won't the nutrients disappear first?" The hale and hearty old man continued to speak. Qin Guang shook his head. "Old mister, you only see the gains and losses in front of you. You don't understand the true mystery of this mission like I do. Although it seems that we are enemies with the divine race, there are still 4 tasks waiting for us in this world of slaughter. The meaning of the 5th task is to test whether or not we humans will lend a helping hand when the divine race is on the verge of destruction. If we let them die now, then what if we need them to help us in the next part of the mission? If they are targeted by the Massacre World mission, then of course we will be targeted as well. Then there will be a situation where your awakened power can't deal with it. When that time comes, who will come to save you?" Everyone was silent. Also, in the next 4 waves of Mirage Beasts, will there be a part that requires both God power and awakened power to kill? When that time comes, will we just stand there and watch? Qin Guang said each word slowly. "Alright, I understand. Let's take out the things." The hale and hearty old man finally gritted his teeth and said to a companion beside him. This person was still a little unwilling, but the old man looked at him with a firm gaze. He hesitated a little and finally nodded silently. The next moment, what appeared in the palm of his hand was a spray can with a skull logo. "What is this?" Qin Guang asked while trying to pinch the giant golden mosquito in his left hand to death. "Military super strong mosquito repellent," the old man said with a pained expression. He was pained for the man who exchanged for the mosquito repellent. It must be super expensive. Sigh, a whole 10,000 reward points are gone. Now I'm completely out of ammunition and food. The old man said with incomparable distress, and then another can appeared in his other hand. Saying that, he walked to Wethany's side, picked up the mosquito repellent and sprayed it on the little girl. The effect was really outstanding. 5 giant golden mosquitoes soared into the sky and instantly escaped. His eyes lit up and he shouted in the direction of Qin Guang, "Mr. Dang, I received a system prompt saying that my mosquito repellent can repel mosquitoes for half an hour with the help of Fatty's mosquito killer." Qin Guang was also overjoyed. "Awesome. But one can only spray 50 people. In this way, my 2 cans can only provide 2 hours of shelter for the remaining 20 Protoss." The man added. Qin Guang's left hand was still exerting force. 2 hours? That's enough. I'll think of a way. So, the old man ran around with the mosquito repellent. In less than a minute, the 20 or so Protoss who had fallen to the ground were no longer attached to them. Instead, there were dozens of big guys of different colors flying around under the leadership of the 5 golden mosquitoes. They were at a loss and did not know where to go. But these giant mosquitoes did not last long. A few seconds later, they changed direction and rushed towards Qin Guang. Qin Guang was shocked. He had to throw away the guy in his left hand that was still not dead. He quickly stuffed another 10 Viagra into his mouth, and his inner strength surged even more. He waved his hands like a golden snake and shouted, "Hurry up! Give it to the divine Emperor Yu Ting behind me." Before he finished speaking, dozens of giant mosquitoes flew over in a menacing manner. The inner qi in Qin Guang's body flowed out like a flood. Unbearable pain came from all over his body, and extreme fatigue almost tore his body apart. Fortunately, he had the innate ability of the earth explosion to protect him. The young man with the military mosquito repellent rushed over. Qin Guang suddenly felt that something was wrong. He raised his hand to stop him, but it was already a step too late. The young man still sprayed the mosquito repellent on Yu Ting and even clapped his hands in satisfaction. Done. Qin Guang sucked in a breath of cold air. This is bad. Chapter 1177. It was good that the mosquito repellent, which cost 5,000 reward points, was effective, but the problem was, where would the giant mosquitoes go after losing their main target? A second later he got the answer. The smug mosquito repellent guy was so scared that he froze on the spot, not knowing what to do. The 10 giant mosquitoes that had been frantically surrounding Divine Emperor Yu Ting, refusing to leave, instantly turned around and headed straight for him. It had been a long time since he had been bitten by a mosquito, but he still remembered the strong sense of powerlessness he felt at that time. What would it feel like to be bitten by a big guy the size of a human head now? He didn't even want to think about how he would be sucked dry in about 3 seconds. But this wasn't the worst. On the other side, the dozens of mosquitoes that had been rushing toward Qin Guang and Yu Ting also stopped midway, and in the next moment they rushed toward the people over there. Faced with this situation, most ordinary players panicked, and their scalps felt like they were going to explode. Qin Guang was also very annoyed. He shouldn't have asked the mosquito repellent guy to give Yu Ting a shot. He should have let the mosquitoes surround Yu Ting. In this way, all of them were concentrated on his side. Although it was very difficult for him to resist, he had yet to use the strongest palm of the 18 mosquito subduing palms, repenting against mosquitoes, so it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. Of course, Qin Guang had left the move until now not because he was deliberately hiding it, but because there were many prerequisites to use this move. Back then, the senior martial emperor had come to a sudden realization when he was about to reach the end of his life. In the end, he had integrated all his knowledge into this last move. As the name suggested, mosquito repellent. To put it simply, his last palm strike was comparable to young hero Yang's melancholic sadness palm. It contained an incomparably majestic momentum, infinite emotions, and an incomparably exquisite palm technique and inner force circulation method, which pushed its power and momentum to the extreme. Could be said that one move could shock the world. The reason why it had such terrifying power was because of the senior martial emperor's deepest emotion before he died. Regret. I always make life difficult for the mosquitoes, and I can't even accept a satisfactory disciple. What on earth am I after? Am I stupid? Am I out of my mind? Who in the entire true martial land can be found as stupid as me? Just as he was cursing himself, another giant forest mosquito flew in front of him, and it was an extremely powerful mosquito king that he had never faced before. He scolded the mosquito king again. It's all your fault. When the old man first learned martial arts, he sent your children and grandchildren to disturb me, causing me to go mad. My father died to save my bloodline. Not only have you harmed my father, but you've also harmed me for the rest of my life. With self-blame, regret, and boundless hatred, the anti-mosquito martial emperor struck out with the strongest palm strike of his life and finally killed the mosquito king. Then, with his last breath, he carved the last palm strike on the stone wall with his finger and died on the spot. Countless years later, Qin Guang came here to see and learn it, and it could be regarded as an inheritance. Now, Qin Guang used a higher level of true martial divine power to promote the anti-mosquito regret. The overall power might not be as good as the effect of the yin and yang qi in the true martial realm, but it could definitely be regarded as the strongest unique skill since he entered the slaughter world. Moreover, the attribute was very suitable for the giant mosquitoes in front of him, so it would definitely be effective. Well, after saying so much, in fact, according to Qin Guang's understanding of the heavenly Holy Grail, he was most likely the scapegoat for the creation of the damn anti-mosquito resistance palm. After all, when he was in primary school, he secretly read old Mr. Jin's martial arts novels, and especially admired Master Qiao Feng's 18 dragon subduing palms. Usually, when he was joking with his classmates after class, he often made fun of the 18 dragon subduing palms. When the heavenly Holy Grail created the true martial realm, it must have used his memory for reference so that in the end it came up with the 18 mosquito subduing palms that looked very serious, but in fact, it was all kinds of unserious. It even found such a serious story background for the strongest move, anti-mosquito regret. He could only express his admiration. Now, it was also very troublesome for him to use this move. He had to use the 18 mosquito resistance martial emperor's lifetime unique skill once in order to fully understand the sorrow of the martial emperor's life. Only then would he be able to brew the feelings of anti-mosquito regret, and then the move he used would have that taste and power. Even if he was the true martial saint and sat on the true martial divine power, if he wanted to deal with the deadly giant mosquitoes in the slaughter world, he had to abide by the basic rules of the 18 mosquito palms. Only the moves that contained emotions were the real unique skills. Then the problem was, although the 18 mosquito resistance martial emperor's lifetime essence was the 18 mosquito resistance palm, and it sounded like he only needed to use one palm at a time to finish the task, this was all a lie. Until now he had only used the second palm. What? Someone asked him when he used the first palm? How could he tell others that the first palm of the 18 mosquito resistance palm was actually the so-called cloud expelling palm, also known as shocking 100 mosquitoes? What was even more insane was that the first palm strike actually needed at least 1,000 strikes to be completed. Right now, the ink-black energy that he struck out was actually only the second palm strike. Its real name was Divine Mosquito Tail Whip. According to his estimation, it would take at least an hour for him to come up with the anti-mosquito regret. The time bought by the mosquito repellent brother was just right, but now he only had about 10 seconds? What are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and spray mosquito repellent on yourselves? Do you guys want to die? To think that I still treated you guys as elites. Aren't you guys too disappointing? Qin Guang felt that he had become a nanny. Perhaps this slaughter world didn't require him to kill, it should be renamed to the nanny world. What made him even angrier was that not only did he have to protect the lives of mortals, but he also had to protect the lives of the celestial race. He really didn't have any dignity as a supreme nanny. He shouted as he stood in front of the mosquito repellent brother to buy some time for him. The mosquito repellent brother didn't need to be reminded. He had already taken out his bottle, but he was 2 seconds late and didn't spray it. On the other side where Peasant and his companions were gathered, the brother left another bottle of mosquito repellent in the hands of the hale and hearty old man. Seeing that the situation wasn't looking good, the old man acted as though he was 60 years younger. He shouted for everyone to stand in a row and planned to spray the mosquito repellent. But it was too late. Tens of large mosquitoes were about to pounce on them, but the old man didn't even spray 1/3 of them. He stood in front of Peasant. Qin Guang knew that things were not looking good. He thought that the rest of them were doomed. However, at this critical moment, he suddenly felt that the giant mosquito in front of him had slowed down a lot, as if it had fallen into a swamp. Qin Guang was puzzled. What was going on? There was no reason. He didn't do anything. With such doubts, Qin Guang turned his head to look at the mosquito repellent brother. He discovered that the young fellow's mouth was wide open as he tried to aim the mosquito repellent at himself. The young fellow's movements were strange. It was like slow motion? That's right, it was slow motion. Everyone on the other side and the giant mosquito formation that was flying halfway also became slow motion. Hearing this, Qin Guang rejoiced. Could it be that his potential had awakened, and he managed to comprehend a new ability that allowed him to control time? Wait, what was that? Just as he was about to show off, he suddenly noticed a slender figure flashing past the players in the distance. As she ran, she took the mosquito repellent from the old man's hand and sprayed it on everyone. Qin Guang looked closely. Wasn't that Peasant? She was holding an hourglass in her hand, and it was glowing faintly. It seemed to be working. Qin Guang instantly figured it out. He recalled that she mentioned that her ability was related to time. She even mentioned that her special tool in the reward system store was an hourglass. She finally used her awakened ability. It was so powerful that Qin Guang was in awe. He didn't know why it didn't work on him. She didn't have enough reward points to exchange for the hourglass after her second awakening. How did she buy it? Peasant was busy. She felt the gaze from afar and glanced at Qin Guang. She was shocked, but she quickly calmed down. Mr. Dang was the most special being in the world of massacre. It wasn't strange that her time ability didn't work on him. Though she was thinking, her movements weren't slow. She ran around and sprayed the mosquito repellent on herself. Qin Guang wasn't looking at Peasant. He was helping the young fellow spray the mosquito repellent. After a while, the large mosquitoes and the gamers returned to normal. The hale and hearty elder exclaimed, "Where's the mosquito repellent?" Peasant passed the bottle to the elder listlessly and said, "There wasn't enough time. I used my ability." Everyone sprayed the mosquito repellent. "Don't panic." The gamers didn't know what was going on, but the mosquitoes in front of them turned around and left without hesitation. Smelling the scent on their own bodies, they had no choice but to believe it. It was the same for Qin Guang as well. He threw the bottle of mosquito repellent to that man and took a few steps back. At the same time he said, "I've already sprayed it on you, so don't waste it. Run over there and meet up with them." As he dealt with the 10 large mosquitoes, Qin Guang surveyed the other side. After ensuring that everyone was safe, he heaved a sigh of relief. Slapping the giant golden mosquito that flew quickly into his face, he then patted his own chest, thinking that under his brilliant and divine command, he had once again passed through a dangerous situation. "I seem to have forgotten something." Qin Guang looked at the tens of large mosquitoes that had lost their targets and were in a daze. Then he came to his senses. Previously he was able to fend off the mosquitoes easily and treat them like human targets. That was because the stupid mosquitoes only knew how to attack Yu Ting. Now, besides himself, everyone was sprayed with the mosquito repellent. Without a target to attack, they could only attack him. Just as he was thinking about this, a loud buzzing sound rang in his ears. Dozens of big guys in the distance suddenly turned around and pounced in his direction. Even the 10 big guys around him became even more frenzied. Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to be afraid. He couldn't let the mosquito repellent guy spray him again. If the giant mosquitoes attacked normal players again, he wouldn't be able to save them even if he wanted to. Forget it, just leave it at that. Take care of yourselves. I'm heading to the corner. After that, Qin Guang turned around and ran towards the corner of the wall. The buzzing sounds behind him became louder. All the large mosquitoes were charging at him. Chapter 1178. The giant golden mosquitoes were faster than him. As he ran, he also had to use the 18 palm strikes to chase away nearly 10 giant golden mosquitoes that were chasing at the very front. Fortunately, his moves and the giant mosquitoes' attributes countered each other. Although he couldn't slap them to death, he could still easily send them flying. After a while, he successfully rushed to the bottom of the wall. When he looked back, dozens of big fellows were still chasing him. The needles were even shining with a dazzling cold light. It was a very frightening sight. Bite him to death. Sting him to death. Suck him dry. Suck this lowly slave dry. Eat this bald head. Qin Guang's ears twitched. He had a dumbfounded look on his face. "Thank you, Holy Grail, for being so considerate. When the mission segment changed, you actually prepared such a unique setting for me. Even the Mosaic NPC audience's lines were changed. I really shouldn't have complained about the poor quality of the Mosaic NPC. Your special care really touched me." While he was letting his imagination run wild, the ink-black energy that he shot out suddenly turned into even finer and thicker pinky fingers. These energies seemed to be strange. After he shot them out, they did not quickly dissipate. Instead, they condensed and floated in the air. They did not look like inner energy but more like flying catkins floating in the air. He finally reached the third move of the 18 palm strikes. This move was called, Seeing the Mosquitoes in the Field. He couldn't tell anyone. He really couldn't tell anyone. Before the giant mosquitoes rushed to his side, he actually used the strange palm strike to set up a strange big net that floated in front of him. Of course, if one looked closely, they would also see that the big net was still constantly dissipating. It was just that the speed at which it dissipated was not as fast as the speed at which Qin Guang replenished it with new palms. That was why it seemed to be getting thicker and thicker. A few giant golden mosquitoes rushed to the front and fiercely plunged into the big net formed by the catkins. They madly rushed in. Shockingly sharp needles pierced into Qin Guang's bald face as if they were being stabbed into something. As Qin Guang slowly retreated to the corner of the wall step by step, he continued to strike with his palms methodically, piling up the flying catkins in front of him more and more. Only when the needles of the giant golden mosquitoes were too close would he deliberately move his hand over and use his fingernails to fiercely flick them back. Behind the giant golden mosquito, other mosquitoes of different colors were also charging in with the flying catkins. As time passed, the flying wadding in front of Chen Guang became thicker and thicker. The giant golden mosquitoes that were charging at the innermost layer were slowly pushed out by the thick wadding. The other giant mosquitoes were even worse, unable to move an inch forward. He blocked it. Chen Guang wiped the sweat from his forehead and continued to pat the cotton wool outside. After the cotton wool was thickened to a certain level, the speed at which it spread and the speed at which he added it formed a subtle balance. It was as though there were a few sheets of thick cotton nets in front of him, helping him to block the giant mosquito formation outside. Looking at his work, Chen Guang sighed in his heart. Fortunately, he was strong and knew many unique skills. The third form of the 18 palms was suitable for this situation. Otherwise he would have failed miserably. What is Mr. Dang doing? Is his awakening ability to turn himself into a cocoon? It looks fun. The magical archer looked at the scene from afar and said, "Don't joke. It's not time to relax yet. We have to think of a way to help him," Peasant said with a frown. He couldn't relax and said with a frown, "Don't joke around." The Sonda coach disagreed. "If you want to go, you can go. I'm not going. These mosquitoes are so scary. What can we do if we go up? Won't we only create trouble for him? What if we attract the mosquitoes' firepower? Didn't Mr. Dang say that we just have to take care of ourselves?" "That's right. We can't harm these mosquitoes. What we should do is cheer for Mr. Dang." Another member of the mixed martial arts coaching team said calmly. Peasant looked at the selfish members and said slowly, "Have you thought about it? Mr. Dang seems to have stabilized the situation, but the mosquito repellent can only last for half an hour. We only have 2 bottles. If we want to protect the Protoss, the mosquito repellent can only buy us an hour. If we give up on the Protoss, we can live for another 2 hours, but we'll have to face the next form of the golden mosquitoes. What should we do?" The hale and hearty elder said, "There's another worse possibility. We don't know what Mr. Dang's ability is and how long he can last. If Mr. Dang is defeated, what should we do? Or, if he can't kill the mosquitoes after an hour and can only protect himself, we'll still die," the young prodigy said weakly as he walked over. The genius high school student walked over with the help of the fat household appliance worker. His face turned even paler as he spoke weakly. "What good ideas do you have? Hurry up and take it out." The Sonda coach urged them on. The young prodigy glanced at him and said, "What I can do, I've been doing it since the beginning. I'm not like someone who only knows how to talk big but will only drop the ball at the crucial moment." "What do you mean?" The coach was infuriated by the young prodigy's indirect scolding. "I don't mean anything. I just don't like you. Don't you understand?" The young prodigy didn't care about his threat and retorted, "All right, stop talking. Regardless, we should send some mosquito killers to Mr. Dang," Peasant said as he gritted his teeth. Everyone nodded in agreement. It was a good idea. Everyone nodded in agreement. This was a good idea. Anyway, Fatty could still make household appliances. The coach asked, "Who's going?" No one answered him. They were all people who said nice things, but when it came to a critical moment, not a single one of them could stand up. Peasant gritted his teeth and said, "All of you, forget it, the 4 of us will go. Give us the mosquito killers." She was referring to the 4 members of her team. Forget it, let's go together. If we die, we die together. If we live together. None of us will be able to escape. The coach had thought things through. Peasant snorted and walked forward. Nobody noticed her solemn expression. Just now, in order to exchange for this hourglass, she had accepted a strange side mission. The mission description was as follows. Side mission. Accept a specific mission to obtain 100,000 reward points. Can be repaid in installments, interest-free. Mission description. Spend 1 reward point to exchange for an ultra-high-definition digital camera to record images of Dang Wu. Don't be discovered by Dang Wu. If discovered, the player will be reset. If the promise isn't fulfilled, the player will be reset. Mission special note. Time hourglass, level 2, can extend 1 second to 10 seconds. Each use will consume 10,000 reward points. Cooldown time, 24 hours. This side mission came at the right time. It was like giving her a pillow when she was sleepy. 10 seconds was enough for her to spray the mosquito repellent on everyone. The mission description was too strange and she couldn't understand it. Eventually she did it. It wasn't that Peasant harbored ill intentions towards Chen Guang. She had no choice. She didn't think taking photos of Chen Guang during the massacre mission would be harmful to Chen Guang. Would they be able to leave this place? Would they be able to retain their memories of this place after leaving this place? Also, Would the things they took photos of be obtained by someone else? Everything was unknown. The most important thing was to think of a way to survive. She couldn't think of anything else. Subconsciously, she felt that Mr. Dang Wu was being targeted throughout the mission. He was too kind and too benevolent. That was why he had a bad attitude on the surface, but in reality he wanted to protect everyone. The last sentence of the side mission was, "Don't be discovered by Dang Wu." That was a blatant lie. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dang Wu. I didn't want to do this. Just taking a photo of your handsome face, it shouldn't be too much, right?" Peasant touched her eyelashes. She was convinced that the ultra-high-definition digital camera had to be so wretched. Could modern technology really do it? Using fake eyelashes to take photos of the camera? Did it have to be so high-end? With doubts, Peasant and the others carefully approached the cocoon created by Chen Guang. Then they put down the liquid mosquito killer and retreated far away. Peasant wasn't the only one complaining about Dang Wu's experience. Chen Guang was also complaining about himself. "Perhaps I've been tricked." Whether it was the normal gamers or the virtual gods, they were real gamers. They were enjoying the process of the massacre mission. As for me, I'm the plaything of the gamers. I'm their nanny. Are you trying to kill me? Forget it, I've already done this much, what else can I do? Do I have to finish the remaining 18 mosquito repellent palms within an hour? I still have to get rid of these damn mosquitoes, okay? Open. Chen Guang shouted and stuffed 20 blue capsules of Viagra into his mouth. The third form of the 18 mosquito repellent palms was completed. With a loud bang, the cocoon that he had accumulated for a long time exploded. Tens of mosquitoes were blasted into the sky, buzzing loudly. Countless shards of wings fluttered in the air like glass shards, slowly floating in the air, looking like a gorgeous spring rain. Everyone was ecstatic. Mr. Dang's martial arts were unparalleled. In the end, Chen Guang couldn't hold back from shouting before he unleashed the 18 palms, just like how it was written in Hong Kong comics. He leaped into the air and shouted, "The fourth form of the 18 mosquito repellent palms, flying mosquitoes in the sky." The gold fan in the MMA coaching team couldn't take it anymore. F***CK. Mr. Dang, what's the grudge between you and Mr. Jin? Why are you complaining about him at this time? Mr. Jin's coffin can't hold on anymore. The coach slapped the back of the lad's head and said, "He's still alive. What do you mean by the coffin can't hold on anymore? Yes, be careful that Mr. Jin's family comes to cover your coffin. It's a slip of the tongue. It's my fault, my fault." The lad apologized profusely. He was embarrassed too. Actually, no one knew that Chen Guang was having a headache at this moment. The name "Flying Mosquitoes in the Sky" was appropriate. You don't know that there's another move in the 18 mosquito repellent palms. It's very reasonable. Chapter 1179. While he was flying in the air, the flying mosquito used both its hands and feet to attack the angel general. Both of his feet were frantically kicking the heads of the giant mosquitoes that were charging at him. Every time he touched them, he would release them immediately. He did not exert too much force, but only used the recoil force and the breathing method of the lightness technique to make his body float in the air. It was just like the cloud ladder used by the masters of the Wudong sect in the Wuxia TV series. When he was in the air, it was easier for the large mosquitoes to attack him. He couldn't use the wall behind him to surround himself with enemies. When Mr. used the flying mosquito in the sky, the situation didn't improve. The gamers couldn't help but complain. It's not as good as standing on the ground and fighting the large mosquitoes. At least they were evenly matched. Another gamer complained. Peasant stood up and said, "What do you know? Mr. Dang must have his own plans." Peasant's eyes were fixed on Chen Guang, who was moving around in the air like a butterfly among the mosquitoes. She initially wanted to blink her eyes out of boredom to distract the camera. But when she looked at Chen Guang, she couldn't even think of blinking her eyes. Her eyes were as wide as the bells hanging on a cow's neck. Zhu Tang. Chen Guang didn't know he was being secretly filmed. He was immersed in the flying mosquito in the sky. He heard the gamers' complaints, but he was too lazy to reply. "What do you know? It looks bad, but everything is under the control of the old man. If you know how the mosquito resistance martial emperor came up with this technique, you will know how powerful it is. Back then, when the anti-mosquito martial emperor was besieged by hundreds of ferocious giant forest mosquitoes, he was chased to a dead end. He flew into the sky in a rage and battled with hundreds of powerful giant forest mosquitoes for an entire day. In the end, he killed all of them. In this long battle, the more the anti-mosquito martial emperor fought, the more he learned. At the beginning, he could only dodge left and right, but he gradually became more proficient. He could move around the hundreds of giant mosquitoes without changing his expression. Later on, he could even borrow the mosquito's strength to fight back, playing with the mosquitoes in his palms and feet. After that day, the mosquito resistance martial emperor spent 2 years to summarize his experience into the fourth technique, flying mosquito in the sky. At this time, Qin Guang seemed to be in a tight spot. It was the natural zero, one opening attribute of this peerless technique. However, as long as he executed the technique, he would be able to understand the attributes of each mosquito. The more he fought, the more he would be able to use the mosquito's attacks to defeat the mosquitoes with fewer. Every move had the flavor of Tai Chi's 4 liang striking 1,000 jin. Flying mosquito in the sky was especially suitable for group battles. When used, he could always use the mosquitoes to restrain each other, giving him a chance to take a break and slowly recover his strength. Finally, after a period of time, he would accumulate enough strength to execute a big move, killing hundreds of giant forest mosquitoes. But today, Qin Guang didn't intend to completely copy the mosquito resistance martial emperor's technique. He didn't have that much time and he didn't have that many mosquitoes to face. He only intended to use the fastest speed possible to finish all his moves. He definitely wouldn't be able to kill these super strong giant forest mosquitoes that had crazily evolved to this level in the world of slaughter, but it didn't matter. He just had to continue with the next move. He stuffed a bunch of small pills into his mouth. Then, under the dumbfounded gazes of the crowd, Qin Guang became extremely vigorous as if he had been injected with chicken blood. He kept dodging and moving in the air. Every moment he was in a dangerous situation, but he was like an acrobat walking on a tightrope. He didn't give these mosquitoes the slightest chance to touch him. Not only that, he became more and more ferocious as he fought. His hands danced like dragons and phoenixes, and his feet looked like they were tap dancing in the air. Dozens of giant forest mosquitoes pounced at him crazily, but they were always bounced back by him with all kinds of exquisite postures and angles, including the strongest golden forest mosquitoes. In addition, the power of his moves became more and more ferocious, and his aura became higher and higher. At the beginning it was light, but later, it became more and more violent like the waves of the Qiantang River. All the players were dumbfounded. Wouldn't Mr. Dang get tired? Even with the Viagra sustained release capsules, the fatigue wasn't just from physical exertion. Human muscle fibers were like machines that constantly contracted and released. There would always be mechanical fatigue and there would be a need to add lubricant and lower the temperature. However, ever since entering the slaughtering world, Mr. Dang had only taken a short break in between each wave of magical beasts. Most of the time he was always at the forefront, like a tireless fighting machine. This time, it was the most obvious when dealing with the mosquitoes. He was lazy at the beginning, but after the mosquitoes started to gather and evolve, he didn't take a breather. Put the mosquito killer closer. Don't be afraid, the mosquito repellent is very effective. They won't turn around. In midair, Qin Guang felt that the momentum and emotions of the mosquitoes in the sky were almost ready. It was time for the final blow, so he shouted loudly. Peasant was about to lead his team forward when the hale and hearty elder walked out and said, "This time let's go." 30 seconds later, the hale and hearty elder and his 4 followers carefully moved the mosquito killer 10 meters forward. They formed a tighter circle and the mosquito repellent in the air became denser. The others couldn't detect the changes in the mosquitoes, but Qin Guang was meticulous. His reaction and strength were weakened by at least 1 to 3%. The electric appliance Fat Man's mosquito killer looked like a joke, but the effect was outstanding. The mosquitoes were monsters that he couldn't kill. It was impressive that the mosquito repellent could weaken them slightly. Good. Qin Guang shouted in midair. He spun rapidly in the air like a spinning top. As he spun faster, it was difficult for the large mosquitoes to get close to him. They were repelled when they got close. After being repelled, the large mosquitoes seemed to be attracted by something. They flew towards Qin Guang actively and passively. A series of violent collisions happened in a flash. Towards the end, Qin Guang's emotions surged. His moves were no longer as shallow as before. Instead, he started clashing head-on without holding back. However, his entire body, especially his hands and feet, was densely covered with the core of the true martial divine art. Then, according to the secret inner strength technique of the anti-mosquito martial emperor, he circulated the protective energy. This protective qijin was different from the qijin he was used to. In the past, his protective qijin usually had a soft characteristic. It could deal with hard weapons, but at the same time, it had a good cushioning effect against blunt objects. However, the protective energy of the anti-mosquito martial emperor was extremely hard. It was like a layer of carapace covering his body. It wasn't only hard, but it was also slippery. It was like a diamond. When it was hard to the extreme, it would become invulnerable. When the mosquito's needles came in contact with it, they wouldn't be able to pierce through it. Instead, they would simply slide away. Using this unique Qijin technique to deal with other martial artists was, of course, seeking one's own death. It was as if there was nothing and there was no buffering effect at all. However, it was perfect for dealing with mosquitoes. Although the needles of the large mosquitoes were extremely corrosive and penetrating, they were helpless against the hard and slippery anti-mosquito martial emperor's energy. The sound of explosions rang in the air. The large mosquitoes were blown to the side. The broken needles and broken wings fell like snowflakes in the air. Although the name of the flying mosquitoes was not very good, its power was really strong. Especially the fact that it became more and more courageous as it fought, it looked very cool. The ordinary players were excited. Master is invincible. Expensive. If they weren't afraid of disturbing Qin Guang, they would have cheered for him like the NPC audience outside the arena. Qin Guang didn't care what others were thinking. He was busy counting the time in his heart. There wasn't much time left for him. He only had about 50 minutes at most. He had to speed up. Go to hell, mosquitoes. After he shouted in a low voice, he suddenly exploded the protective energy around his body. Pieces of glass-like energy shot out with a loud rumble, raining down on the giant mosquitoes around him like a torrential rain of pear blossoms, scattering them in all directions. However, the energy didn't hurt the audience not far away. After blowing away the large mosquitoes, they quickly dissipated in the air. The previous anti-mosquito martial emperor used this last explosion to kill the remaining dozens of large forest mosquitoes that surrounded him. If Qin Guang's opponents were also at the same level, his explosion would be enough to wipe out all his opponents. The players saw that Qin Guang was full of vigor and thought that he had achieved something. They all raised their arms and cheered. However, Qin Guang fell to the ground again. This time he resisted the urge to shout out the name of the move. It couldn't be helped as the name was too awkward. He didn't learn from old Jin's 18 subduing dragon palms. He didn't know why the anti-mosquito martial emperor suddenly thought of the name, Mosquito Master. After Qin Guang landed, he put his palms together and retreated a few steps. His back leaned against the wall of the bestial coliseum. At the same time he squatted in a horse stance and pushed his palms forward in a Tai Chi posture. This was a master. After a short rest, the mutated large mosquitoes in the sky recovered and swooped down like bombers. We fought so fiercely just now, but it was all bark and no bite. It's useless. The boxing instructor ridiculed. It's easy for you to say. Why don't you try standing there? Peasant said unhappily. The mixed martial arts coach shrugged. There's something I don't know if I should say. Mr. Dang said that he's a veteran player. In this killing mission he did perform a little better than us, but in my opinion he's still not strong enough. These mosquitoes are only the 5th wave. Even if we survive this wave, we won't be able to survive the next 4 waves. Don't forget that 9 is the limit of numbers. I'm sure the 9th wave isn't a small matter. Fireball Magician, who didn't like the boxing instructor, teased him. So? What are you trying to say? Should we retreat to the side and wait for death, or should we bravely charge forward and fight alongside Mr. Dang to squash these damn mosquitoes to death? I didn't mean that. The boxing instructor didn't have the courage to charge forward and die. Peasant asked, What do you mean? The mixed martial arts coach was being watched by everyone. I just feel that Mr. Dang is not as strong as he brags. We can't always rely on him. We have to find a way to become stronger ourselves. Besides, there must be something he knows that we don't know. He's hiding it from us. You're full of nonsense. Shut up. Are you addicted to being an official? It's not enough to be an official in real life. In the game you can't bear to see others stronger and better than you. You don't have any capabilities, but you want everyone to revolve around you? The genius high school student next to him said darkly. Among everyone present, he was probably the first to see through the MMA coach. Enough, stop talking. Look at Mr. Dang's movements. The magic archer advised. At this moment, Qin Guang's fighting style had undergone a drastic change. His palms were gently stretched before him, but the giant mosquitoes still couldn't get close to him, even though they had recovered. Every time a giant mosquito got close to him, he would slap it with his palm like lightning. What was strange was that after these mosquitoes fell into his hands, they would immediately become weak and unable to move. This scene reminded most of the Wuxia people present of a scam they often saw on TV. The legendary Tai Chi Kung Fu that could stop a sparrow from flying when it touched his hand? But that was actually to feed the sparrow medicine. Of course, what they saw on television was a lie. Gurus with real kung fu wouldn't go on television to swindle people. Those who could be seen were definitely liars. But what did Mr. Dang mean? Was it for show? It looked awesome, but what was the use of it? It wasn't like he could kill the mosquitoes, right? It was just a waste of time. Besides, he only had 2 hands, but there were dozens of mosquitoes. Could he handle it? While everyone was thinking this, Qin Guang flicked his wrist like lightning, and the mosquito in his palm shot out like lightning, crashing into another golden mosquito that was about to pounce. The 2 mosquitoes collided, bursting with a metallic luster and sparks, as if 2 planes had collided in midair and caused an air crash. Before everyone could recover from the impact, Qin Guang's left hand also shook violently, and he ejected the other mosquito. It was another collision of Mars and Earth. Before the sparks on one end were extinguished, the sparks on the other end lit up again. It was simply overwhelming. He actually used this palm sparrow technique with 2 hands to block the attacks of dozens of giant mosquitoes. My trick is amazing. How many years has he been single? Qin Guang could only say that it was hard to say how many years he had been single in real life, but if he was considered single in the world of cups, then he should have been single for at least 200,000 years. If hand speed was really proportional to the length of time he had been single, then his hand speed should be close to the speed of light. Collecting his thoughts, Qin Guang refocused all his attention on the giant mosquito array in front of him. He had only reached the 5th move, Mosquito Master. Time was getting tight and he couldn't take a breather. Thanks to the reward point store, the Red Bull had been upgraded to a small blue pill. At least he didn't have to drink water while fighting. It was just that it felt a little weird to have his mouth full of pills for a long time. If someone took drugs like him in real life, they would probably die 10 times. In addition, according to the current progress, if he didn't take a breather halfway through, he would probably be able to fight for the last move before the hour was up. As time passed, Qin Guang finally fought for the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th moves. The others didn't understand his real intentions. They just thought that he was helplessly trying to find ways to deal with the giant mosquitoes, and everyone's confidence continued to decline. Qin Guang's moves changed again and again. It seemed that each move was more and more powerful than the last, but the actual effect reflected in the actual effect was always like a blooming flower, but there was no actual effect. In the blink of an eye, half an hour had passed, and a new problem was placed in front of everyone. They definitely had to replenish the mosquito repellent on them, but what about the Protoss? Should they replenish the mosquito repellent, or should they use a knife, or should they completely ignore them? According to Mr. Dang, of course they had to save them. But now Mr. Dang couldn't care less about restricting everyone, and everyone could make their own decisions. From my point of view, the best solution is to kill the Protoss. Listen to me, there's no benefit in saving the Protoss. The boxing instructor could always pick the words that Qin Guang didn't like to hear. Peasant denied it decisively. Impossible. Previously, Mr. Dang had said that if the entire divine race were to die, then we would definitely die too. That's better than dying in half an hour. How do you know that Mr. Dang can't deal with the mosquitoes? Don't joke. It's been half an hour. Is the situation any better? Let's kill the Protoss first. At least we can stall for another 2 hours. If we do as you said, we'll only live for another hour. What's the difference? Qin Guang, who was a distance away, heard the quarrel and flew into a rage. Are you ignoring my words? I said that I can solve all the problems in an hour. Just listen to me. The boxing instructor, I'm warning you for the last time. If you're stubborn and want to die, I don't mind killing you personally. He couldn't take it anymore. This fellow's performance was acceptable at the start, but now he was like a rat that spoiled a pot of soup. He was restless and had all sorts of bad ideas. He even tried to undermine Dang's authority among the gamers. The purpose of a person like him was to destroy the situation that Dang had painstakingly created. He was a stumbling block for Dang to lead the gamers in this massacre mission. He was a black sheep and he was using up his benevolence. Everyone fell silent when they heard this. The boxing instructor said anxiously, Mr. Dang, what do you mean? I'm making this suggestion for the sake of everyone. I don't mean anything. I really just want to kill you. Everyone else, don't look at me with a panicked expression. No matter how you interpret it, my judgment is that killing this Sanda practitioner will increase everyone's chances of survival. This is good for everyone. It's good for everyone, Qin Guang said sinisterly as he dealt with the mosquitoes in front of him. Are you kidding? How can you do this? It's already suspicious that you want to save the Protoss. Now you're threatening to kill a human? You're too abnormal. You say that you're an old player, but the Protoss say that you're the big boss. Are you? Before he finished speaking, Qin Guang, who was originally wrapped in the giant mosquitoes, appeared in front of him like lightning. Are you trying to say that I'm the mastermind behind all this? Was he the most sinister one? Then you can further damage my image in everyone's hearts? Your calculations are not bad, but you miscalculated one thing, and that is the overwhelming difference in strength. So you can die now. Chapter 1180. Of course, there was a limit to his tolerance. This MMA coach had been courting death for too long. He didn't have much time to dawdle. From the moment he planned to make a move to the moment he actually killed someone, it was only a short 1 or 2 seconds. He didn't give the others a chance to react at all. The MMA coach didn't understand why Mr. Dang would suddenly kill him before he died. He clutched his neck in pain and retreated little by little. Blood gushed out of his neck like crazy. The defense provided by the improved combat suit that he was so proud of couldn't withstand Qin Guang's casual chop. It was so much so that he didn't even have the time to activate his awakened ability or use the gold sore medicine. His neck was completely broken. Qin Guang floated away and the ordinary players were silent. The MMA coach had led the group for a long time. Although he wasn't successful and didn't win the hearts of the people, there were still people who believed that he could lead them out of this world of killing. Until now, there were still 5 people who followed him, including the card magician. Now that he was suddenly dead, these 5 people suddenly lost their backbone and felt as if they had been abandoned. But they were more resentful. They felt that Dang Wu had gone too far. He killed someone without saying a word, and the person he killed was their leader. But in the end, they didn't spit out a word. Qin Guang's killing the chicken to warn the monkey was certainly effective. They were also afraid that Qin Guang would put a crime on them for hindering everyone's survival and then kill them without explaining at all. The MMA coach's encounter made them wake up, and they no longer dared to think of Qin Guang as a brainless, benevolent and generous grandpa NPC. This grandpa NPC would kill people. On the other side, after killing this unstable factor, Qin Guang rushed back into the encirclement of the giant mosquitoes. The others also understood what he meant and obediently sprayed mosquito repellent on everyone and the Protoss again. If Mr. Dang can't kill all these giant mosquitoes in an hour, then we're really done for this time. No one will think you're mute if you don't say a few words. If you don't want to die, then obediently shut your mouth. The poker magician reminded softly and looked at Qin Guang with a look of lingering fear. Peasant, who was nearby, heard their conversation. He turned his head and glanced at them, but he didn't say anything to defend Qin Guang. It wasn't that she had a problem with Qin Guang, but that she had finally come to a realization. Judging from the death rate of this slaughter mission, those who could survive and succeed once were the cream of the crop. They were true experts and definitely not easy to deal with. Although Mr. Dang looked kind, and his big bald head looked like an enlightened monk as he said, he was an old player, so he must have seen countless life and death situations. Then he must have developed a heart of stone. Otherwise he would have died in the previous game mission. People like them, who were only able to survive until now because of his protection, were a little too rash and lacked sufficient respect for him. In fact, he was a true powerhouse who should have kept his word. It was no wonder that he was targeted by the game's secret side mission. He must have performed like a bug in the previous missions. With such thoughts in mind, Peasant continued to stare at Qin Guang. She forgot that there was a camera in her eyelashes. Qin Guang wasn't able to detect the camera in Peasant's eyelashes. Moreover, he didn't have the time to think about it. He was using the 18 palm strikes to fight the giant mosquitoes. As the fight progressed, Qin Guang's progress became faster. This had to do with the evolution of the 18 palm strikes to resist the mosquitoes. It was obvious that the higher the anti-mosquito martial emperor got, the more exquisite his martial arts became, and the more he pursued the effect of killing with one strike. Ordinary moves that could inflict small wounds could no longer meet his needs. What he wanted to deal with was no longer the ordinary giant forest mosquitoes, but the overlord of the mosquitoes, the king of the giant mosquitoes. Therefore he could no longer rely on the previous shallow moves that could inflict small wounds. He had to change to a powerful sure-kill move. As a result, in the eyes of the crowd, his moves became more and more expansive, all of them orderly and forceful. The mutated giant mosquitoes were beaten into a mess. It looked as though there would be casualties in the next second. What made the spectators feel hopeless was that none of the mutated giant mosquitoes fell. The more ferocious Mr. Warlord was, the more tenacious the giant mosquitoes were. They didn't seem to be fatigued and couldn't be killed. However, only Qin Guang knew that the 18 mosquito subduing palms was truly worthy of being called the 18 mosquito subduing palm. The giant mosquitoes were difficult to deal with because they had absorbed the flesh and blood of their own kind. They had also absorbed the power of the virtual gods. They had evolved to the limit of insects. It was like the difference between Qin Guang and humans. Insects had unparalleled recovery abilities, let alone the overlord of the giant mosquitoes. After being bombarded by Qin Guang's 18 palm strikes to the giant mosquitoes like a human target, the giant mosquitoes were constantly affected by the mosquito killer fluid. It was like a human practicing in a turbulent stream of water. They were constantly hindered. Their bodies were already full of hidden injuries. It was just that they were very subtle and not easy to be noticed. This was also related to the characteristics of insects. Just like cockroaches, even if they were stepped on, they could still struggle and shake their legs. The same was true for mosquitoes. Minor internal injuries could not make them appear as if their muscles and bones were injured. But Qin Guang knew that this was a milestone. Before this, these giant mosquitoes seemed to be impervious to fire and water. No matter how serious their injuries were, they could still recover. It was just like his earth sauce exploder ability which gave him an immortal body. Now it seemed that the old man was a little more shameless. This meant that repent against mosquitoes could indeed take their lives. After confirming this, Qin Guang's spirit was lifted. He went all out to devote himself to the great cause of the 18 palm strikes. Time passed little by little. Everyone felt that a day was like a year. They pinched their fingers and counted how long they could live. In the beginning, everyone was still counting down in minutes, but later on no one knew who started it, but they actually started counting down from 600 seconds. It was a feeling of despair, as if a day was passing like a year. It seems like we're doomed. I'm very sensitive to time, and the error won't exceed 5 seconds. We only have 60 seconds left, my friends. The genius high school student, who had been quiet all this while, finally took the initiative to speak. Being Mr. Sai, what can we do? We can't do anything other than rely on him. Peasant turned his head and explained to Qin Guang, don't say that. Being Mr. is working hard, but some things, we can only do our best and leave it to fate? Yes, we can't help it all. Forget it, let's not dwell on this matter. We're just lying around, what right do we have to question being Mr.? If we die, so be it. Who knows if it's a good thing or a bad thing to be reset? Just like in real life, don't we often wonder if we go to a better world after death? The hale and hearty old man was very open-minded. If the mixed martial arts coach was still alive, he would definitely ridicule the old man, saying that he was already so old anyway, so it didn't matter if he died. But at this time, no one dared to disagree with him. At this moment, Peasant trembled and said, everyone stop talking. Look at Mr. Dang. At this moment, Qin Guang, who was still besieged by countless giant mosquitoes, suddenly changed his aura. After the flying mosquito flew into the sky, he once again flew into the air, but this time, his performance was completely different from before. When the flying mosquitoes were in the sky, he used all kinds of methods to neutralize and attack them. But this time he was like a Buddha ascending to heaven. He put his palms together and closed his eyes tightly as he flew in the air. Everyone didn't understand what he meant. While they were puzzled, they saw the dozens of giant mosquitoes in the air suddenly change. They no longer attacked him as crazily as before, but retreated into the distance inexplicably. The next moment, a shocking scene occurred. The giant mosquitoes actually began to bite and kill each other. What do they mean? The fat man asked in bewilderment. The genius high school student said worriedly, perhaps the mosquitoes realized that they couldn't defeat Mr. Dang, so they became anxious? The fireball magician said, they have a certain level of intelligence. Since they can't achieve their goal by fighting alone, they might as well. The genius high school student interrupted him. Yes, they might as well combine their strengths. Just like the 6 gods in the cartoon, they might as well form the strongest form. I don't know if we should rejoice or despair. Anyway, we will be able to see the next form of the giant golden mosquitoes. This is what Mr. Dang has been worried about. The giant mosquitoes didn't fight for long. After about 10 seconds, the mutated giant mosquitoes that hadn't lost a single one were reduced by half. But Qin Guang didn't move, and the giant mosquitoes continued to devour and merge. After another 10 seconds, the giant mosquitoes were reduced to tens of giant mosquitoes. This time they were all golden giant mosquitoes. Obviously, the price of their evolution was quite heavy. So far, none of them had completed the complete transformation. On the other side, Qin Guang, who was floating in the air, still didn't open his eyes, but the sound of waves inexplicably burst out from his body. Everyone felt a faint pain in their eardrums when they heard it. They were at least 100 meters away. The giant mosquitoes seemed to know that it was a critical moment. Without any hesitation, they pounced again and fought in a chaotic battle. I really want to rush up and do something fierce. The strong man carrying a flamethrower behind the hale and hearty old man couldn't help but say. The giant mosquitoes have evolved to this level. Our attacks really can't even count as tickles. You better not go and die. The old man decisively dispelled this idea. In the air, countless giant mosquitoes' broken wings, broken bodies, broken legs, and even syringes were flying everywhere. Golden blood splashed out like raindrops. No one could clearly see the process of the battle between the giant golden mosquitoes, but they knew that it was extremely tragic. What was even more terrifying was that the limbs that flew out did not go to waste at all. Not long after they flew out, they turned back into golden energy and condensed back into the battle of the giant mosquitoes. Finally, another 30 seconds passed. The giant mosquitoes in the sky shone brightly. The real mutated Mosquito King was born. In the sky, a giant mosquito about the height of a human was quietly floating. It didn't flap its wings but inexplicably floated. However, this giant mosquito was no longer golden in color. Instead, it had returned to its original pitch-black appearance. It seemed to have returned to its original state. Its whole body was shining with a cold metallic light. Coupled with its slender body, it looked like a slender, agile, black-armored warrior. What made everyone even more afraid was that after this Mosquito King was born, it didn't crazily rush toward Qin Guang like the previous giant mosquitoes. Instead, it turned around and looked at the Protoss behind them. The Mosquito King's fist-sized eyes revealed an emotion that everyone could understand. It was called greed. This Mosquito King had the wisdom of a human. Thinking back to the immortal body of the mutated giant mosquito, its devouring power, and its indestructible needles, now that it had transformed into this body and possessed human-like intelligence, how strong would it be? No one could imagine it at all, and they could only feel their hair standing on end. At this moment, Qin Guang suddenly opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, muffled thunder sounded around him. Everyone's eyes drifted toward him. Ah, what kind of eyes are those? What kind of vicissitudes are in his eyes? What kind of complicated life did he have to experience to condense such a pair of eyes? It was the sorrow of seeing through the mortal world, and the sharpness of being able to see through everything. You can go to hell. Qin Guang took a deep breath and suddenly rushed forward. He said, since you have human feelings, you should know what it means to repent against mosquitoes. Pia. Qin Guang originally planned to completely replicate the aura of the anti-mosquito martial emperor, but he didn't know why he wanted to slap himself after shouting out the lines. Forget it, this isn't important. What's important is that after the previous 17 palm strikes, my current internal strength circulation mode has completely matched the anti-mosquito martial emperor's technique, and my emotions have been completely replicated. In addition, don't be fooled by the terrifying aura of the Mosquito King. Its body was actually full of hidden dangers left by me when I hit the other giant mosquitoes. It obtained the power of all the giant mosquitoes, but it was also full of my internal strength. Die. Qin Guang roared and flew straight forward. The Mosquito King also made a buzzing sound as if it was retaliated by a human's provocation. It also turned around and flew in the direction of Qin Guang. We can't see anything? The normal gamers were dazzled. Qin Guang and the Mosquito King, who were in mid-air, disappeared at the same time. After their second awakening, they were unable to capture the movements of Qin Guang and the Mosquito King. They could only hear loud pi pi pa pa sounds coming from every corner of their bodies. The genius high school student frowned as he counted. Mr. Dang and the Mosquito King are fighting more than 100 times per second. Peasant tried his best to turn his head, but he was unable to capture the movements of Qin Guang and the Mosquito King. At that moment, a strange notification sounded in her mind. Additional reward points. Please activate the time ability of the side mission to ensure the quality of the recording. Isn't the Massacre World targeting Mr. Dang? Are you giving me free reward points for secretly filming? Chapter 1181. In the sky, the battle between Qin Guang and the Mosquito King was still ongoing. Peasant didn't know how long it would last and whether Mr. Dang could win. However, she did not have the qualification to refuse the side mission, and the reward points have been forcibly issued to her head. Even the killing mission seemed to be afraid that she would not perform well. It was very considerate to remind her that if she did not complete the recording work as required, she would immediately be reset. Peasant didn't have the right to reject the mission, but she didn't use time deceleration on everyone. Instead, she placed her hand in her pocket and placed her finger on the hourglass. She activated the hourglass and sped up her own time. Everyone's attention was focused on the explosions in mid-air. Nobody noticed that Peasant was twisting his head and body at a speed that was different from the rest of the crowd. It was like a rotating anemometer. In the sky, Qin Guang and the black-armored Mosquito King were fighting fiercely, but he didn't use Mosquito Repent. He had 30 seconds left. He wanted to make use of the time to give the Mosquito King more trouble so that he could use his final strike. If Mosquito Repent attacked the Mosquito King, it would be troublesome. With the speed of the Mosquito King, he couldn't stop it from sucking everyone dry. What was the next stage of the Mosquito King? Forget it. Qin Guang didn't want to imagine. If the gamers were sucked dry, it was fine. If the gods, especially Yu Ting, were sucked dry, the Mosquito King might evolve to the point where it could defeat him. That would be a huge problem. So he either didn't attack or he had to succeed. Lad, didn't you say there was a 5-second error? Another minute has passed, right? Nothing changed? The hale and hearty old man turned his head to look at the sky, but he couldn't see anything. He chased after the flashing sparks in the sky to capture Qin Guang and the Mosquito King, but it was futile. He couldn't help but complain about the high school student. Just now, the genius high school student had calculated the time so accurately that everyone believed it to be true. Their hearts were in their throats and there were even all sorts of countdowns. In the end, when the time was up, there was no movement at all. It felt as if they had punched the air with all their might, and it was rather uncomfortable. The genius high school student was also embarrassed. His face had even turned paler. There's a small mistake. Don't worry about the details. Maybe there's a slight error in the timing of the mosquito repellent, or maybe the effect of the mosquito repellent has improved because we've made more mosquito repellents. At this time, the fireball magician stood up and said, "Forget it, let's not stand here and watch the immortals fight. Let's find something to do." Ever since the Sonda coach died, he seemed to have become more proactive. "What are you doing? Scratching that monster with your little flame? Can you keep up?" Poker Magician mocked them without holding back. He had always disliked the trio who left the team. The Fireball Magician saw through him and smiled insincerely as he said, "Oh, why? Your boss is dead and now you're the one standing up for him? I'm giving a good idea. What's the meaning of your sarcastic tone? Must you quarrel? Aren't you afraid of angering Mr. Dang? We've been in this strange world for a long time, and you still haven't woken up? If that's the case, I suggest you kill yourselves. That way, I won't waste Mr. Dang's energy to take care of you. Or kill you." To everyone's surprise, it was the delicate female elf archer who stood out to calm the situation. With a few words, she silenced the quarreling duo. The Fireball Magician glanced at the magician and said, let's stand by the side of the gods. If the time really comes and Mr. can't kill this black mosquito, we'll block it for as long as we can. It'll be good to buy some time. It's not necessary. We'll know soon. Peasant used a strange tone and enunciated each word slowly. The onlookers didn't understand, but Peasant wouldn't explain further. She didn't turn her head frantically. Instead, she stared intently at a 30-degree angle in front of her. Everyone followed her gaze and looked forward, but strangely they couldn't see anything. If they didn't know that Peasant was close to Mr. Dang, they would have mocked her. Peasant didn't stop her time acceleration. She couldn't help but speak, so she thought of an unorthodox method. When she spoke, she dragged her voice 10 times longer. That way the onlookers wouldn't notice that her time flow was different. They only felt that her tone was strange. Peasant's time flow was different from the onlookers, but Qin Guang and the Mosquito King's time flow was normal. She looked at the outside world as though she was pressing a button that was 10 times slower. She was able to see the movements of Qin Guang and the Mosquito King. Both of them were moving horizontally. They were in the area where Peasant was facing. Peasant didn't need to turn her head. She only needed to move her eyeballs. In Peasant's eyes, Mr. Dang and the black-armored Mosquito King seemed to be fighting without any strategy, but in fact, it was a frenzied fight. At the beginning, Mr. Dang was at a disadvantage. Although he seemed to be stronger, the Mosquito King was not weak either. What was even more ridiculous was that it had a lot of legs, a total of 6. The needle in the Mosquito King's mouth wasn't just for show. The Mosquito King shook its head like a skilled swordsman. It was difficult to deal with. Fortunately, Mr. Dang's moves were exquisite. Otherwise, he would have fallen into the Mosquito King's trap. To Peasant, Mr. Dang was having a hard time. Although he could sneakily punch or kick the Mosquito King from time to time, this guy's black armor provided him with extremely strong defense. The Mosquito King had a shocking recovery speed. Mr. Dang had broken its legs and needle more than once, but the Mosquito King was able to regrow them instantly. Mr. Dang wasn't a normal warrior. He was injured many times by the Mosquito King, but his recovery speed was faster than the Mosquito King's. No, he didn't need to recover. Even when he was pierced by the needle, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and punched the Mosquito King. At the same time, he allowed the needle to penetrate his body and use his muscles to break the needle. Peasant didn't understand his intention, but when Chen Guang repeated the action for the third time, she understood. The Mosquito King's needle contained a powerful paralyzing venom. The Mosquito King's venom must be extraordinary. If he allowed the needle to poke into his body, Mr. Dang would not be able to resist the venom of the Mosquito King. His body seemed to be more injured, but in fact he was completely free from the venom. His situation was more advantageous. He was indeed Mr. Dang. If she were the Mosquito King, she would have exploded in anger. It was a pity that there weren't 3 connections beside the needle. She couldn't help but shout at the others because she discovered that Chen Guang, who was Mr. Dang, had changed his tactics. He no longer wrestled with the Mosquito King like before. Instead, he drifted in the air at an extremely fast speed. The Mosquito King desperately chased after him, but Mr. Dang was as slippery as a loach. Every time he got close, he would quickly escape. His body was surrounded by a powerful force that pushed her and the Mosquito King apart. Before she shouted, which was 1 second ago, Chen Guang stopped fleeing. He flipped over and charged at the Mosquito King. The distance between the Mosquito King and the Mosquito King shortened. In the blink of an eye, they were tens of meters apart. The others were puzzled when they heard the muffled sound of thunder in the distant void. The sky, which was originally empty, suddenly shone brightly, as if a ray of multicolored light had lit up in that place. Everyone fixed their eyes on it, only to see layers of clouds behind the multicolored light. The color of the clouds was strange. It wasn't the usual blue sky and white clouds. Instead, it was pitch black. However, it looked brighter under the bright sunlight. The crowd finally saw Mr. Dang and the Mosquito King clearly. The Mosquito King and Mr. Dang were standing proudly in the air, facing each other. Mr. Dang extended his hand forward and came out from the Mosquito King's heart. The Mosquito King's 6 sharp legs stabbed into various parts of Mr. Dang's body. Time seemed to have stopped. It went from extreme motion to extreme stillness. Many people couldn't adapt to it. Did they perish together? Such a terrifying thought appeared in many people's minds. Even Peasant, who had witnessed everything, felt the same way. The distant dark clouds became denser, and the muffled rumbling sounds resembled thunder. However, there was no lightning, only a ray of greenish-gray light emitted from the clouds. In the distance, Chen Guang turned his head slightly to look at the crowd and the celestials behind them. Then he turned to look at the Mosquito King and said, "Good, you can die now." The 18th form of the 18 mosquitoes subduing palms, repenting mosquitoes. As he shouted, the thick dark clouds behind him suddenly shrank back. At the same time, his palm that penetrated the Mosquito King's heart gradually surged out of the black mist that seemed to have a substance. The black mist was like tree roots tearing through the ground as it spread out from the Mosquito King's body. The black mist cracked like ice wherever it went. The Mosquito King gave a heart-wrenching scream. Its 6 sharp legs, which were full of barbs, struggled violently as though it wanted to tear Chen Guang apart. The syringe in its mouth broke on its own, but in the blink of an eye, it grew back. Although it was shorter than before, it was just enough for it to peck at Chen Guang's face. But its struggle was still in vain. Although it was only 1 palm, it contained all the essence of the previous 17 palm strikes. Chen Guang knew that it had this move, so he had already covered his upper body with the most powerful protective aura. But the Mosquito King's bite caused sparks to fly. After a few seconds, Chen Guang felt that the hidden injuries in the Mosquito King's body had almost exploded. Then he used his left hand to slap its head. With a loud bang, the black-armored Mosquito King's pointed head exploded like a thunderstorm. The divine power of the 20 celestials who had died turned into colorful flowing lights and shot out from the place where the Mosquito King exploded. They flew everywhere in the slaughter world like fireworks. Chen Guang was also covered in injuries from the explosion. His face was unrecognizable as he plummeted from the sky. But before he landed, he endured the pain and adjusted his posture. "That's right, I can't hit the ground face first." He also seized every second to swallow the gold sore medicine and used the talent ability of the earth paste exploder. "Don't worry about other parts, just protect my face first. My expert image depends on my face. I can't let it be destroyed." Strangely, when the earth paste exploder used its ability, it didn't repair his face as he ordered. Instead, it turned into a terrible black hole and crazily absorbed the various divine powers that were drifting everywhere in the slaughter world or flying to the other celestials who had not died yet. The streams of light formed by the divine power of the god race's projections spun in the air like a river flowing backward. They gathered above Qin Guang's head and turned into a beam of light that fell from the sky. Qin Guang looked up with a blank face. I didn't activate the Earth-Paste Exploder's Devour talent. What's wrong? The closer the light beam got to Qin Guang, the smaller it became. Finally, it turned into a light beam as thick as a pinky and poured into his forehead. Can I absorb the divine powers of those celestials? Am I going to become a god through the slaughter world? So explosive? No, if I can absorb it, I should have absorbed it when I killed the Titan. What's going on? Mr. Deng, you're back. As Qin Guang was puzzled, Peasant, who was slightly closer, couldn't help but remind him. Qin Guang tried to move his head. It didn't affect the light beam. It just flowed from his forehead to the top of his head. Then he turned his head to look. Gosh, why is the back of my anus glowing? A trumpet-shaped light. That's not right. Qin Guang turned his head to look at the sky. He was bewildered. The flowing light from his buttocks was as thick as a pinky. After rushing far away, it dispersed again. A portion of it spread to the entire Colosseum, but another portion flowed back to the celestial projections that had not died yet. Yu Ting, who was further away, had stood up. He had a disgusted expression as he resisted the thunder power that flowed back to his body. But his resistance was futile. The divine power that spurted out from his anus hit his face and then returned to his body. Qin Guang felt his body and didn't feel that the Earth-Paste Exploder's talent had become stronger. He didn't understand. What did I absorb? Does this mean that the god power has passed through my body? What's the point? Why did I have to come out from my anus? This old man has an illustrious name. Wait, I seem to have realized something. Previously, I was indeed unable to absorb the divine power of the Titan god, but those virtual gods who had died had been devoured by the mutated giant mosquitoes of the slaughtering world. Then these mosquitoes had stolen and digested their divine power. Of course, this also included the power that Yu Ting and the others had absorbed after being stung. Perhaps the characteristics of the Celestials' divine powers were changed by the mosquitoes, and they were attracted to the Earth-Paste Exploder's talent? Was that why this happened? The question was, why did the special characteristics of the divine powers pass through my body? Could it be that I'm the legendary activated charcoal water purifier? Then what the hell did I absorb? Blarg. A distance away, Wethany, who had just managed to stand up, was greedily absorbing the divine powers. She lifted her head and saw Qin Guang's anus blossoming. She clutched her stomach and vomited. Chapter 1182. Yu Ting sighed. Wethany, stop struggling. Just turn your face away. You won't feel anything if you can't see it. Wethany, like Yu Ting, could not resist at all. Poor Wethany. She felt that it would have been better if she had not woken up so quickly. She looked enviously at the other gods who were still in a deep coma. At that moment, the electronic notification finally sounded. Congratulations, player, for successfully completing Mission 5. Reward points will be distributed to all player accounts according to the completion of the mission. Along with this notification, Qin Guang checked his merchant store once more and grinned. He was not sure how many reward points he had obtained for Mission 5, but he had obtained more than 200,000 reward points. Now he had nearly 300,000 reward points in total. But most importantly, he found that he could finally press the enhanceability button in his shop. It was no longer just a decoration. He began to look forward to it. With the old man's current ability, if he wanted to enhance it, what would it be like? Also, after the enhancement, I should be able to purchase exclusive items according to my awakened ability, right? What would it be? Just thinking about it made him look forward to it. What would it be? Qin Guang happily clicked on the ability enhancement button while looking forward to what would happen to his body. As for what he sucked in earlier, he couldn't get it out no matter how hard he tried. Thus, he decided not to bother himself with something that he couldn't find an answer to. At that moment, he was not the only one at a loss. Yu Ting and Wethany, who had just woken up, looked at each other in confusion. The two gods had vomited enough before. In fact, they could only feel nausea and retch. There was nothing in their stomachs that could actually be vomited. But when the two gods carefully checked, they were puzzled to find that there was no change in the divine power that they had regained. It was slightly weaker, but in essence, it had not weakened. It could still be recovered by eating the strange blue pill. It was like a person who had become thin and weak because of long-term malnutrition, but their bones would not change at all. The reason why the divine power had become weak was that part of it had been consumed by the mosquito during the battle. But only the skin had been touched and the foundation inside had not been touched. But why was it that in this inexplicable game setting, when they were returning to their base after losing their strength? Why did that fellow when Noon do such a thing? Disgusting. Also, where did the divine power of the other dead gods go? While the two gods were thinking, they also received a notification from the electronic voice. They hurriedly looked at their respective shops and then their faces fell. Including the reward points that he had received before, Yu Ting now had about 70,000 reward points in his hands. There were still no options for ability enhancement. There were other things that he could buy, but for the Protoss, these were meaningless toys. At the same time, the other Protoss woke up one after another. One by one they checked their bodies and were overjoyed. Just now, they thought that they were dead for sure, but they never thought that it was just equivalent to a nap. When they woke up, there was nothing wrong with them, and they even picked up 10 or 20,000 reward points for free. Although they did not know what use it was, they would see the light sooner or later, right? On the other hand, many ordinary players have no idea about ability enhancement. The first awakening requires 20 reward points, the second awakening requires a full 2,000 points, and they want the third awakening? The experienced gamers could guess with their toes that it would require 200,000 reward points. The difference was too great and they could not even count on it. But as they get more and more reward points, especially when the individual stock exceeds 50,000, some mechanism seems to be triggered in the shop, and the options that can be purchased suddenly increase and become strange, overwhelming. Everyone was dazzled by the dense list, which looked like a shopping list in an online shopping mall. Peasant and the genius high school student were talking to different gamers at different places. They were reminding the gamers not to blindly buy items based on their own abilities. They were trying to achieve the highest combat power at the lowest cost. In the fifth wave of the giant mosquito beast battle, the ordinary gamers were only a bystander at the beginning, and they were useless in the later stages. Though Mr. Dang was able to deal with the black-scale Mosquito King, he did not have the time to take care of the others. The giant Mosquito King would only become stronger. If they did not strengthen their self-defense capabilities, they would definitely die. In addition, the small group of people had undergone many evolutions and there had been many changes. The members of the small group had to consider the awakened abilities of their teammates and cooperate with each other when purchasing the items. Just as the crowd was scratching their heads and trying to think of a match, not many people noticed that the Mr. Dang they were talking about had been standing there blankly for more than a few minutes without moving. Even Qin Guang had no idea what was going on. After he pressed on the button, his thoughts came to a complete halt. The reward points were deducted from his shop like the numbers on a slot machine. Finally, after a long time, the 300,000 reward points in Qin Guang's pocket were emptied. That's right, his expenditure wasn't 200,000 reward points. He was left with nothing. After waking up, Qin Guang was bewildered. He checked his shop system to make sure he was not hallucinating. The reward points that he had saved up were all gone. He did not obtain the awakened abilities as he wished. He did not feel anything. Could it be that my shop is a leaky version? Do I not have any special abilities? Are you kidding me? I don't believe it. Qin Guang looked at the gamers equipping themselves with various pieces of sci-fi equipment. He turned his head away silently. Forget it, he had to believe it. Up until now, there were only the most basic items in his shop. He didn't get anything, but look at what others had. The gamer who carried the sniper rifle was sitting in what looked like a light prism tank. He peeked his head out and looked around. It seemed like the entire team was in the tank. The 4 members of Peasant's team were wearing strange emerald armor. The armor was made of green vines and looked beautiful. It was obviously an elven product. Another girl used her awakened ability, which was to summon a pokeball. At this moment, the girls were surrounding the Kelda duck that she had summoned, teasing it non-stop. On the other side, the warrior, magician, and beast tamer were domineering. The gamer who carried the Ishgenos fortress was equipped with armor. The genius high school student and the fat household appliance gamer. Alright, you guys can do it. The fat household appliance guy could only summon household appliances, but he had a special item in his shop. It turned out to be an exoskeleton armor that he wore on his body. This item was so considerate that it even took into account his big belly. I'm envious of you. Qin Guang stared blankly. Fortunately, there were other gamers who were as pitiful as him. That's right, they were the Celestials who had not made any moves. The first 2 awakenings had nothing to do with the Celestials. Perhaps when they exceeded 200,000 reward points, they would be able to use them. Thank you, Noon. Suddenly Yu Ting walked over with a strange expression on his face. Didn't you want to self-destruct and kill me? I should have spoiled your plans. Why are you thanking me? Qin Guang crossed his arms and ignored Yu Ting. Yes, but no matter what, you saved my life and the lives of the other Celestials. Qin Guang still had a poker face. But I'm not happy. If I had my way, I'd be more than happy to watch you die. Yu Ting didn't say anything more. He turned and walked away. Lord Yu Ting, why did you thank him? Wethany muttered. Yu Ting used a special channel that only the Celestials could hear. To lower his guard. When he's not paying attention, we can attack. Qin Guang looked at the guy's back and couldn't help but mock him. Did you really think I couldn't hear you? Do you think I'm an idiot? Lord Yu Ting, that Noon stared at us as if he wanted to eat us. Now eat the gods. It's okay. He was touched by my kindness. All players' attention. The 6th mission is about to begin. All players' attention. Suddenly, an electronic notification sounded in everyone's mind. This time, whether it was the celestial race or the human race, everyone's expression became extremely serious. The 5th mission, the mosquitoes, was a pleasant surprise. Nobody dared to belittle this massacre mission. 6th mission hint, jump rope 100 times. The electronic notification sounded again. The gamers looked at each other. What the heck was that? Jump rope? 100 times. As they were puzzled, a new purchasable item appeared in everyone's system shop with a ding sound. Worn-out jump rope. Will be destroyed after 100 uses. Gosh, it's for real. Mr. Dang, what's going on? The gamers who were prepared for battle were at a loss. Peasant couldn't help but run to Qin Guang's side to ask. The gamers exchanged for the jump rope, but none of them dared to jump. They were worried that something was amiss. Qin Guang said righteously, forget it, I'll give it a try. He wanted to exchange for the jump rope, but he discovered that his pocket was empty. He said without batting an eyelid, Peasant, help me exchange for a jump rope. Peasant didn't know what was going on, but she wouldn't ask about the reward points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A minute later, as he counted to 100, the skipping rope broke into pieces without any warning. Mr. Dang, how's it going? Qin Guang didn't want to tell the gamers. You might not believe me, but I've completed mission 6. Ah? It's true. How many reward points are there? 50, 50,000, so many. Are there any special instructions? No. Then what's going on? How could it be so easy? God knows. Don't ask me. Forget it, let the others get to work. It's really just skipping 100 times. 3 minutes later, as the gamers and the Celestials completed their respective missions, the notification of the completion of Mission 6 rang in their minds, but a portion of the gamers didn't hear it. Everyone was puzzled. Suddenly, this group of people and the god race suddenly exploded. The people and the god race who had been laughing and joking just a moment ago were suddenly at a loss. What's going on? What's going on? The fat electrician looked bewilderedly at the disappearing corpses of his comrades. Beside him was the ghastly genius high school student. When he was jumping, he stopped twice. The gamers who died had the same situation. The genius high school student gritted his teeth and said coldly. The genius high school student gritted his teeth and said coldly. Qin Guang reacted at the same time and he broke out in cold sweat. The terrifying massacre world had evolved into a trap in the mission description. If the gamers died because of a disagreement, it would be useless to exchange for more equipment. If the gamers were to die, they would die. Then wouldn't the Celestials? On the normal player's side, although most of them had never jumped rope before, they had at least seen it. Moreover, they were in the mission space, so they didn't dare to be careless. Only a small number of people made mistakes because of one reason or another. However, it was different for the Celestials. They clearly treated it as a game. When they were jumping, most of the Celestials were intermittent and didn't take it seriously. Sure enough, when Qin Guang turned around, Yu Ting and Wethany were looking around with pained expressions. Beside them, many virtual Celestials were exploding like balloons. The tragic death of these virtual Celestials was shocking. It was similar to the Hercules who died in Qin Guang's hands. The fragments of their bodies all turned into a semi-solid liquid that was eventually absorbed by the soil of the Colosseum. The divine power that escaped from these death Celestials was not filtered by him. Qin Guang suddenly had an illusion. Maybe this massacre mission didn't want him to do that kind of thing again? Don't let my chrysanthemum bloom? But I don't even know what the benefits are, okay? Also, what about my reward points? What about the 50,000 reward points? I just got them. How did they suddenly disappear? Who stole them? When I wanted to exchange for the jump rope just now, I didn't have any. Does this mean that my awakened ability is the legendary black hole, specifically sucking away my reward points? But where is it sucking away? Attention all players, Mission 7 is about to begin. The Scourge army is about to arrive. Please survive the attack of Hellfire. While he was at a loss, the mission prompt sounded again. It seemed that after the giant mosquito formation of Mission 5, the pace of the entire massacre world had suddenly increased. Before the sound of the notification faded away, before everyone and the Protoss could recover from the tragic deaths of their companions, a loud rumbling sound came from the sky. Everyone looked up into the sky. In the sky outside the walls of the Colosseum, giant orange-red meteorites were swooping down. Hellfire? It's time to show my real skills. The beast tamer with the long whip calmed himself down and laughed. He looked at his two companions beside him. Up here. My Misha. The Misha Great Bear that attacks cities. Specialized in dismantling Hellfire. Chapter 1183. Following the beast tamer's roar, a tunnel with a diameter of more than 6 meters appeared beside him, and a dull roar came from the tunnel. In the next moment, a huge bear jumped out of the tunnel. It was the legendary Misha bear. Misha roared at the sky as it landed. Its roar was deafening, suppressing the sound of the meteorites in the sky and the cheers of the NPC audience in the Colosseum. But the proud look on the beast tamer's face froze after 5 seconds because he realized that although his Misha bear was huge, its shape was not quite right. Qin Guang turned his head and could not bear to look anymore. It was too tragic. How can I tell you that this slaughtering world is usually created based on the old man's memory? You, the beast tamer, summon Misha War Bear, so your class must be Druid. Then your Misha War Bear must be based on the standards of War 3. Whether it was its size, attack type, or appearance, it should be in line with the settings in War 3. Therefore, the 3D model of the legendary War 3 engine appeared in front of everyone. This Misha looked miserable. Its appearance and sound effects were not in the same dimension at all. Its limbs and shoulders looked like pointy polygons. The funniest thing was its head, which was a large trapezoid with 2 conical ears. Qin Guang held back his laughter. He thought that his Dota tower was much better than War 3. Since there was already a Misha War Bear, there was no reason for the Hellfire from War 3 to appear. Then these Hellfires were most likely not the characteristics of War 3. They should be based on the Dota tower. He decided to kindly remind them, when the Hellfire lands, everyone pay attention to stand far away, and be sure to completely avoid the circle of this thing when it lands. If I'm not mistaken, when the Hellfire hits the ground, there will be a special effect of dizziness. Also, the Hellfire should not be affected by siege attacks. The beast tamer hurriedly explained, I'm just joking. Qin Guang said, but if anyone has an attack that can eliminate mana loss, you can try it. Well, has anyone played Dota Tower before? It's the kind of scattered mana orb that anti-mage uses in the game. Every time you hit it, it's called mana shave. The female elven archer raised her hand. Me? I have devil-piercing arrows. Qin Guang snapped his fingers twice. Awesome. The hale and hearty old man's team was in an awkward position. What the hell was this mana reduction? We had the Apocalypse tank and the game versions were different. One was magic and the other was sci-fi. How were we supposed to fight happily? The Apocalypse tank looked awesome, but if it was hit head-on by a Hellfire meteor, everyone would probably be turned into sky lanterns. Everyone hurriedly got out again and tens of thousands of reward points were wasted. Not long after, accompanied by a loud bang, the first Hellfire meteor crashed into the Colosseum. He didn't know what material the meteorite was made of. It was about 4 to 5 meters in diameter. Looking at its flying speed, it would at least create a huge crater like a real meteorite when it hit the ground. But in fact, although this thing shook the ground when it hit, it was much lighter than ordinary people thought. It didn't even create a crater. At the moment of landing, there seemed to be a magic circle about 10 meters in diameter flashing. It was unknown if this magic circle had offset the impact. Isn't this Hellfire powerful? Someone in the crowd suddenly said this, and the next moment, the stone that had just hit the ground rolled forward on its own. After rolling for less than a round, the round stone disintegrated on its own, stretched out its limbs, and a giant stone man about 6 meters tall appeared in front of everyone. This stone man was covered in blue-red flames, and people could feel the heat wave even from so far away. Mr. Dang, what kind of stun effect are you talking about? While everyone was watching, someone in the crowd suddenly asked. Qin Guang ignored him and looked back at the meteorites that were falling one after another. This was just the beginning, but there were still countless meteors in the sky. This was too dense. If the magic circle produced when each hellfire landed was so big, then it was impossible for people to completely avoid the coverage of the magic circle. As expected, it didn't take long for the hellfire meteorites to fall from the sky like raindrops. At first, people could still dodge, but as time passed, the meteorites became denser, and finally there was no way to avoid them. The first person to be covered by the magic circle when the hellfire landed was the electrical appliance fatty. The poor fat guy couldn't run easily with his big belly, so he suddenly staggered and fell to the ground. When he wanted to get up, it was already too late. His whole body was covered by the magic circle, and he screamed in pain inside the magic circle. As the magic array took shape, his screams came to an abrupt end. After another second, in a short interval, he crawled up and shouted, "There really is a stun effect. I can't move at all." Before he finished speaking, another meteorite fell not far from him, and the magic circle that appeared on the ground covered him again. This time, the control time of the hellfire meteorite was just perfect. "I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Save me. Save me." After another second, the electrical appliance fatty screamed in despair, but this was his last call for help. Ever since then, every time a meteorite fell, another one would immediately follow, leaving no space for him at all. The legendary seamless skill? Die from dizziness? However, no one had the time to care about him at this moment. Ordinary players were succumbing one after another, and everyone couldn't even take care of themselves. Only Qin Guang had it a little easier. He relied on his fast movement technique and reaction speed to wander around. However, he didn't dare to step into the range of the magic array. If he was careless and got stunned as well, he'd be finished. At this time, Qin Guang was looking at the Protoss with a gloomy face. Faced with this situation, what else could he say? The giant mosquito circle in Mission 5 was targeted at the Protoss. This was something that everyone realized after a while. But now, this Mission 7 was undoubtedly targeted at the ordinary players, but the bias of the massacre quest was too obvious. The place where the Protoss stayed was like a clear sky. Not a single meteorite approached that side. From the beginning, the meteorites had been on the side of the ordinary players. In addition, Yu Ting and the others were walking around casually. It was strange that no matter where they went, there would be no hellfire meteorites. This scene was very much like a miracle that people often saw. One end of the street was raining cats and dogs, while the other end was clear. Looking at the brazen hellfire meteorites in the sky, Qin Guang shrugged. Can you be any more obvious? On this end, more and more ordinary players were stunned by the hellfire meteorite magic circle. Everyone thought they were dead for sure. Finally, a meteor smashed towards Asenath, who was wearing heavy armor. However, he was in a stunned state and had no way to avoid it. He thought to himself, "I'm really dying unjustly." Looking at the big guy coming toward him, this guy's face was ashen. Finally, under the panicked and frightened gazes of the crowd, or under the interested gazes of the god race, the meteorite hit the brawny man's head head-on. Feeling the scorching heat wave on his face, he thought he was dead for sure. Everyone else thought he was dead for sure too. But after a short sound, the meteorite rolled half a circle forward and turned into a stone giant covered in flames. It turned around and waved its stone fist trying to hit him. If he guessed correctly, this was probably the special attack of Hellfire, Fist of Flames. But it didn't manage to hit it, because the magic circle produced when the next Hellfire meteorite landed had stunned it as well. This stun effect didn't differentiate between friend and foe. The strong man who should have been smashed into a meat patty stood there blankly. Other than his face looking a little flushed from overheating, he was actually unharmed. This scene left everyone at a loss. Only Qin Guang knew that he hadn't guessed wrong. It was indeed the ultimate move of the warlock in the sword tower, summoning Hellfire. The skill description of Hellfire was like this. When it smashed down, enemies within the magic circle would be stunned for a second, ignoring magic immunity. But no damage would be done. Even if the body was completely smashed, there wouldn't be any HP loss. The real damage was the Fist of Flames that came out after the Hellfire landed, and the permanent sacrifice effect brought by the flames on the surface of the Hellfire giant's body. Obviously, the massacre mission forcefully copied the settings in the sword tower, even if this setting was hard to understand and unreasonable. But the strong warrior didn't feel proud for long. Although the Hellfire stone man in front of him couldn't swing its Fist of Flames down because of the constant dizziness, the guy still felt unbearably hot. He was very uncomfortable being roasted by the flames of the eternal sacrifice. Although there was no HP bar on his head, he knew that his physiological functions were constantly declining. The other gamers who were stunned from the start were in a similar situation. As more and more Hellfire Stone men stood around them, the heat from the eternal sacrifice became more intense, and they felt more uncomfortable. Other than that, although the rock golem's movements were constantly interrupted, they were slightly more resistant to the stun effect than the players. The Flame Fist's completion rate was advancing bit by bit, and there would always be a moment when their fists would hit someone. According to the settings of the Sword Tower game, the Fist of the Stone Men was extremely powerful, and the gamers wouldn't be able to withstand the blows. Peasant and her companions were in the most difficult situation. They had spent most of their reward points on the Rattan armor, but the Rattan armor didn't have any resistance against the fire damage. Instead, it caused the damage to increase. In less than 30 seconds, the number of stone golems around the four of them did not exceed 3, but their Rattan armors had already begun to ignite with flames. Qin Guang was helpless. He had to save them. He could only take the risk of approaching Peasant and his companions. He wanted to see if he could withstand the dizziness. As he approached, he tried to put half of his foot into the mana formation of the Hellfire Stone. Then he was immobilized. It was indeed a dizziness that disregarded mana resistance. It was unreasonable. The meteorites that fell from the sky seemed to have spirituality. When Qin Guang was immobilized, the meteorites in the sky immediately changed direction and converged in Qin Guang's direction. Within a minute, Qin Guang's surroundings were filled with Hellfire Stone men. It was a pity that they were all stone men. Moreover, the temperature around Qin Guang was getting higher. The scorching flames struck his body, causing his stamina to deplete rapidly. What's worse is that at this time, his reward points have been completely emptied to nothing. He can't refine a small pill, or even if he does, he can't put it into his mouth. Muffled groans were heard from afar. The female elf archer couldn't hold on any longer before Qin Guang. The beast tamer's polygonal Misha war bear raised its head angrily, but it was useless. It couldn't even swing its claws, let alone the fact that the special effect of its siege attack was useless. Everyone had yet to recover from the giant mosquito formation in Mission 5, and they had yet to recover from the extremely sinister Mission 6. In the blink of an eye, they had entered an even more dangerous situation. In a few more minutes, no matter how the Hellfire Stone Giant's movements were interrupted, it would still land its fiery fists on them. When that happened, everyone would be surrounded by stone golems. There wouldn't even be a place for them to stand. All the players, including Qin Guang, were thinking that Mission 5 was a test to see if the normal players could save the Protoss. Mission 7 was a test to see if the Protoss could save the normal humans. In the 5th mission, the normal players were a burden, but with the strength of Mr. Dang, it could be said that he had barely passed the mission. But now, could they count on the Protoss? Would they be grateful for Mr. Dang's help? At that moment, those who could still look in the direction of the Protoss couldn't help but look at them. Then they saw a scene that infuriated them. At this moment, Qin Guang's lungs were about to explode. Not long ago, Yu Ting had come to thank him. Perhaps because he wanted to ease the tension between them, he sat on the ground and looked at the players from time to time. Not only did they not want to help, but they also looked at the players with evil intentions. "Yu Ting, you ungrateful Protoss scum." Qin Guang gritted his teeth. If he had known that this would happen, he would have turned around and killed the Mosquito King. While Qin Guang was cursing in his heart, the Pantheon suddenly moved and tried to find out where the normal players were. Then, something unbelievable happened. The extremely biased Killing World had already locked the normal players in place, but as the Protoss moved closer, the Protoss let go of those who were already under its control. The Hellfire spell formation did not apply the stun effect, and the normal players and the Hellfire Stone Giants were freed. The players with fast reflexes or strong defense took the opportunity to escape. Some forcefully endured the flaming fist and turned to run. More than 20 Protoss followed these mortals, protecting them all the way out of the Hellfire Meteorite's range of control. Only a very small number of players died tragically under the flaming fists because of exhaustion, slow speed or low defense, or simply could not withstand the burning of the eternal sacrifice. But in short, most of the ordinary players were out of danger under the protection of the Protoss, who were almost one-on-one. Seeing this, Qin Guang felt a little relieved and gave Yu Ting a look of approval. Yu Ting met his gaze and smiled meaningfully. About 5 or 6 minutes later, Qin Guang could no longer see the outside world. He was surrounded by red Hellfire Stone Giants. Meteors continued to fall from the sky, filling up every inch of space around him. Qin Guang was confused. He looked up at the sky and realized that the Hellfire meteorites were flying in a straight line. Other than around him, the meteorites had completely avoided the other areas of the Colosseum. Chen Guang finally understood Yu Ting's plot. He was using the advantage of the hidden rules of the 7th mission to have the Protoss spread throughout the Colosseum. On one hand, it was to protect the other normal players and reduce casualties. After all, there were still 2 more missions. On the other hand, the more the Protoss spread out, the more Hellfire meteorites would fall on him. Chen Guang cursed in his heart. This ingrate wanted to control him seamlessly until he died? After a while, peasants' shout came from outside. "Mr. Dang, be careful. We are being controlled by the Protoss. They want to kill you." As expected. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't speak, Chen Guang really wanted to greet Yu Ting with vulgarities. "I'm your grandpa NPC, I'm your protector, and this is how you repay me?" The massacre world was really messing with him. They made it seem like he had to save Yu Ting and the other Protoss gods, yet they were so hostile towards him. How could they do this to him? Perhaps if he died, the Protoss would not be able to complete the massacre mission. However, they would only lose a projection while he would die. Hence, they were in an invincible position. What should he do now? Wait for death? Chen Guang tried to use the true martial divine skill, but it was to no avail. He tried to use the Earth Burner's innate ability, but it was to no avail. The stun effect that ignored mana immunity was just that powerful. Not long after, the first stone golem's fist landed on Chen Guang's face. However, due to the stun effect, the fiery fist was not heavy. Chen Guang was not sent flying, but half of his body was stuck to the fist. Fine, I might as well be sent flying, Chen Guang thought. What fiery fist? Isn't this a frying pan for pancakes? Did I take a punch, or am I being tortured by the enhanced version of eternal sacrifice? When will this matter come to an end? Chen Guang looked up at the sky. The dense string of Hellfire meteorites was endless. Only God knew how long it would take. "Dang Wu, I'm sorry." Yu Ting's voice finally came from outside. He did not sound proud but rather ashamed. Chen Guang felt that he was hypocritical and pretentious. As the protective aura decreased, half of his body became hotter and hotter. Am I really going to die here? Chen Guang didn't believe it. First of all, this was the world in cup. There was no reason he would be burned alive so easily. Secondly, even if he was burned to death, the world in cup could at least give him a chance to revive, right? Moreover, although the force stun could freeze the talent ability of the Earth-Paste Exploder, it could not burn the talent ability away. Hellfire was an elemental creature composed of earth and fire elements. Although its level was not low, it was still far from the God Emperor level Earthburner. Chen Guang complained to himself. "I'm not afraid of death, but cooking one side is annoying." Just as he was complaining, another fist finally landed on his back from behind. Good, now both sides are at the same temperature. "I'm cooked." Chen Guang felt that after the 7th mission was over, he could only vent the hatred in his heart by frying Yu Ting alive. However, after the incident at the giant mosquito formation, he felt that he could not kill Yu Ting personally. It was best to think of a way to let the gods die at the hands of the magical beast. However, it was difficult to do that. It's so hot. I can smell the burnt smell in my nose. Forget it, maybe my nose is burnt. Fortunately, the stone golems are densely packed, so no one can see my terrible state. He secretly rejoiced. However, someone didn't think so. Peasant, who was being held by Wethany intimately, touched her eyelashes without batting an eyelash. Just now, she estimated that she would not be able to capture what was inside, so she turned her face elsewhere. She tried to communicate with the others with her eyes to think of a way to save Mr. Dang. However, a side mission notification appeared in her mind. It required her to maintain her filming state to repay the huge reward points loan. This might even affect her reward points credit record. What the heck is credit record? I'm buying an hourglass, not a house with a mortgage. Chapter 1184. That was why Chen Guang thought he wasn't seen, but everything that happened to him was captured by Peasant's eyelash camera. "Lord Yu Ting, are we really not going to save him?" In the center of the Protoss camp, Vesini turned her head and asked Divine Emperor Yu Ting, who was beside her, as if the matter had nothing to do with her. Yu Ting nodded expressionlessly. "It's enough to save the mortals. As for him, I hope he dies quickly." "If he dies, will our mission be over? Will it be that easy?" Wethany asked again. Yu Ting grinned. He couldn't help but recall his time in the Endless Divinity. Originally, he was traveling in the lower realm that he had personally created to comprehend the true meaning of the gods and catch up to the footsteps of his friend who had already passed away. However, he suddenly felt an irresistible will ordering him to participate in this so-called game. In this game he had to do everything he could to stop an existence from achieving his goal. Of course, the best outcome would be to completely kill him in this game world. This will came too suddenly and violently. Even a divine emperor like him couldn't defend against it. It came without a sound, and it was even stronger than the will of a divine god. Then, this will transmitted more consciousness to him. It told him that it represented the source of the endless divinity. The task he was leading the advance party to protect the stability of the endless divinity. The gods had to fight against the most vicious devil in the history of the endless divinity. It was more sinister and terrifying than the devil that caused the death of two divine gods and the collapse of the divine world. This represented the will of the endless divinity. Yu Ting couldn't resist it, so he retracted his will and prepared for battle. At first, he was worried that things would be too complicated. He did not expect that the big boss would expose himself so openly in front of him. It was a pity that all the gods in the advance party were suppressed. He was the only one who could use his divine power, but he was still no match for the big boss. He thought this was a simple test. He didn't expect such a good opportunity to appear in the 9 massacre missions. Even if they could only kill him once, at least they could understand how he died, how he resurrected, and what the truth of the gods' game was. Yu Ting was silent. He continued to stare in the direction where Qin Guang was surrounded. Although his eyes couldn't see through the Hellfire Stone Golem's wrapping, he could sense that the life force inside was weakening. Would Dangwu really die? Yu Ting even had the illusion that things would be so easy. There was a strong feeling of unreality in his heart. The essence will of the endless god realm had personally issued an order, and it was likely that all of the gods in the god realm would be required to participate in this battle. And yet, the opponent was so weak. This was truly inconceivable. Tell everyone to be careful. Although these so-called Hellfire Elemental Giants aren't high level, we're still very weak. Although the rules favor us and we can avoid the stun effect, the power of this fiery fist isn't to be underestimated. Yu Ting and Wethany gave their orders and leaped to the side, just in time to dodge a Hellfire Giant's fist. The scarlet-green flame drifted to his body, burning a hole in his novice combat uniform. Yu Ting's entire body flickered with electricity as he changed into a set of pure white thunder armor. He was probably a perfectionist. In other parts of the Colosseum, the normal players were on full alert as they ran for their lives, not giving the few Hellfire Golems any chance to even touch the corner of their clothes. But if they got a little closer, the burning sensation from the eternal sacrifice effect would be unbearable. Misha, the war bear that was known for its thick skin and strong enough to attack cities, was roaring in pain as it slapped a Hellfire Stone Golem to death. The two of them struck one after another, but Misha Warbear's paw could only scratch off some stone dregs on the Hellfire Stone Giant's body, but Hellfire's raging flame fist left a scar on Misha Warbear's body. The beast tamer's left hand flashed with a green light, and a wave of healing was cast on Misha's body. He waved his whip with his right hand, but it was useless against the Hellfire. Although he couldn't kill the Hellfire he was facing in a short period of time, he at least managed to stall one. On the other hand, the magic archer's performance was particularly eye-catching. Dark blue magic arrows flew out from the elven bow in her hands, nailing into the body of the Hellfire that was chasing after her relentlessly. Each arrow was about the length of an arm. After nailing into the Hellfire's body, they didn't dissipate as quickly as the magic arrows from before. Instead, a spiderweb-like blue crack spread outwards from the point of impact. Wherever these cracks passed, green smoke rose, and the surface of the cracks shone like a galaxy. The crack that spread out from each arrow had to cover an area of at least a meter in diameter before it would slowly heal, and the magic arrows that nailed into the Hellfire's body would dissipate like stardust. This was the special effect of the magic archer's devil-piercing arrow. Its effect was similar to the mana dissipation effect used in the Sword Tower, perhaps even better. After shooting 3 arrows in a row, the magic archer turned around and ran in another direction. A cold shout came from behind her. "Mortal, I've said it before. You can't stray too far from me. Otherwise I'll kill you." The archer's footsteps paused helplessly, then she changed direction. Previously she was actually heading straight for the center of the Colosseum, but unfortunately she was discovered. The number of Hellfires on the periphery was decreasing, and no one knew what kind of mysterious attraction Mr. Donkey had towards the Hellfire, or if the scattered Protoss had an inexplicable repulsive force towards the Hellfire. They had even figured out the range of their repulsive force towards the Hellfire, and through exquisite positioning, they continuously compressed the space in which the Hellfire could move. In the end there was only one result, and that was to converge towards the center. With their lives on the line, everyone wanted to help Chen Guang but they couldn't. All they could do was think of ways to intercept one or two hellfires, and see if they could relieve the pressure on Mr. Donkey. Everyone knew that Donkey wasn't dead yet. As long as the system notification hadn't come, then Donkey was definitely still alive. The Protoss won't let us help him, and the countless hellfires there have already turned into a sea of fire. There's nothing we can do even if we go. In that case we can at least try to do something within our own limits, right? Even if we can only restrain one hellfire, it should at least be a drop in the bucket, right? The Protoss felt that these people's actions were laughable. Right now there were at least 1,000 hellfires in the Colosseum, and most of them were surrounding Donkey. So what if you can restrain 20 or 30 of them? Can you change Donkey's situation? Your actions are meaningless. Lord Yuting, it looks like we can let these mortals go, right? They can't do anything to these hellfires at all, so we might as well let them die. A Protoss in the distance asked in a clear voice. He didn't understand why Yuting wanted to protect these mortals. Although they had heard that it was the leader of the mortals, Donkey, who had saved them during the previous mission to deal with the mosquitoes, not many Protoss were truly grateful. First of all, they weren't here with their real bodies but projections. Although death was a heavy loss, it wasn't unacceptable. Comparing the two, they felt that the dignity of the Protoss was more important. In addition, it was natural for mortals to sacrifice themselves for the Protoss, but there was no need for the Protoss to thank them. It was the same logic as how mortals would never say thank you to pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, ducks, or fish. I've said it before. My decision is final, and no one is allowed to question it. Yuting only coldly replied him with one sentence. In the 5th mission, if we weren't mortals, our projections would have died a long time ago. It's the same now. Donkey might not die, and in the final 8 and 9 missions, we might not be able to escape unscathed. Just like this time's hellfire, the killing side of the mission is very obvious. The mosquitoes also caused us to lose half of our members, but the ordinary players are all safe and sound. This isn't a mission that can be dealt with purely based on strength. Perhaps we have to make use of all the conditions that we can in order to meet the requirements of the mission. Lord Yuting doesn't want the tragedy of the 5th mission to happen again. The gods, who were listening attentively, nodded. As Yuting's mouthpiece, Wethany explained things very clearly. Yuting finally added, perhaps this will be a long and drawn-out war. We should cherish our projection and keep it. Then, as the advance party, we'll be able to establish a foundation in this game. This is our mission. The will of the God realm has chosen us. If we fail completely, our true bodies might be abandoned by the will of the God realm. The gods were instantly speechless. Yuting had spoken the deepest worry in everyone's hearts. When they sensed this mission, none of the gods, including Yuting, had the right to reject it. Once the time was up, they were forcefully sent in. If it was just losing a projection, it would be acceptable. But if they were abandoned by the will of the God realm, what awaited their true bodies was unimaginable. You bastards. I don't care what reason you have. I'll definitely go and help you. Just then a roar came from not far from the center of the Colosseum. It was the muscular man with the shield, Asenath, who had lost control. He ignored the threat of the god beside him, raised his giant shield and charged forward. As he charged, his giant shield flashed and a 2-meter-tall, green-faced, fanged orc head appeared. It was a pity that Qin Guang could not see it, or he would have given the orc head a fright. It was the head of the legendary orc warrior Hellscream Grom. The muscular man did not care about the god chasing after him, charging forward in a straight line. The head of Grom roared and crashed into the hellfire in front of him. Although it did not cause any actual damage to the hellfire, it easily knocked it away. Stop him. Take him under control. Stop playing around. Yuting furrowed his brows and urged. The black-haired god behind the muscular man suddenly sped up, pouncing behind the muscular man like a ghost. But the muscular man suddenly turned around, his lightsaber slashing horizontally as he shouted, "Eat my heroic strike." Heroic strike? You're making me laugh. The black-haired god, who was known for his speed, tilted his body slightly and aimed for the warrior's neck with his 5 fingers. Unexpectedly, the brawny man roared fiercely, "Bastard grandson gave birth to sons without assholes." The black-haired Protoss knew that he was cursing, but he didn't take it seriously. Just as he was about to grab him by the neck, he suddenly lost control of his arm. Even his mood was affected, and all he wanted to do was punch him hard. With a loud bang, the black-haired god's fist landed on the muscular man's chest. The muscular man staggered, but he used the force of the god's punch to turn and run. A veteran player of World of Warcraft would have recognized that the warrior had used another skill called Taunt. But this time, before he could even take 2 steps, the enraged black-haired Protoss caught up to him. The black-haired Protoss slapped him hard on the back of the head, causing him to fall to the ground. Then the Protoss dragged him back before he could be hit by Hellfire's flame fist. He had no choice as his skills were all on cooldown. "Peasant, what should we do?" The magical archer lost count of the number of arrows she had shot. Finally, she destroyed the Hellfire in front of her. She was exhausted, and her body was unable to withstand the continuous shooting of devil-piercing arrows. She turned her head and asked Peasant, who was staring intently at the center of the Colosseum. Peasant's mind raced, but he couldn't do anything. I don't know. She had no good solution. Her time manipulation ability was useless in such a situation. Even if she could escape the control of the gods temporarily, it was meaningless. She couldn't rush in and help. At this moment, Qin Guang knew that he couldn't rely on anyone else. Furthermore, he was a little hungry right now. Unknowingly, he was cooked. But he wasn't dead yet. When the damage was accumulated to a certain extent, the Earth Miner's regeneration endowment was fully activated. He was able to withstand the burning of the flaming fist and eternal sacrifice when he became a pancake. It was just that this feeling was too unbearable. It would be better to just die. Just as he was at his wit's end, he felt his body lighten. He lifted his head and saw that there was no longer a meteor shower in the sky. All the hellfire had descended. This was bad news as it meant that all of the opponents had arrived. But it was also good news as it meant that the stun effect was over. Just as he was showing off, he suddenly felt that this piece of cooked meat was being squeezed in from all directions. He was no longer in the stun effect, and so were the hellfire around him. There were at least 5 hellfires that had been pressing their fists against his body. Now that the dizziness effect had been completely lifted, the 5 hellfires that were charging at the very front erupted with their terrifying strength. There was a crisp sizzling sound. The pitiful Qin Guang was being squeezed into minced meat. The Earth Miner's elemental core was exposed. The strongest hellfire fists were at the front, and their stone fists were the first to strike the Earth Miner's elemental core. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.